Chapter 283. A journey without a destination is true freedom. East, west, south and north. He could do whatever he wanted. This was a feeling that Li Tianlan had never experienced before. No worries, no fetters. He didn't have to look back because the way he came was far away, and he didn't have to be persistent because his purpose was unknown. Life was a journey. Li Tianlan was already on his way to a future that he didn't know and had never thought about. He passed by mountains and rivers. He passed by the downtown. Li Tianlan became more and more relaxed, both physically and mentally. It was a kind of freedom and leisure after letting go. It was forgetting and ignoring, and then it became pure. Without feelings, thoughts, or emotions, he became more and more focused and illusory. In the mountains and rivers, he was the mountains and rivers. In the downtown, he was the downtown. On the way to the world, he was the world. Only when one was really immersed in it would he find that both the mountains and the downtown had their own charm. The autumn rain after the mid-autumn festival in Huiting gradually faded away. He saw the falling leaves in the air in Wuxia. He saw the beautiful mountains and rivers in the central plains. He saw the cold dew and frost after a night in Dongshan. In the northern city, he looked at Yuzhou and heard the winter thunder. After passing by Yuzhou, he saw the first snow in Zhongzhou state this year in Liaodong. The journey was still moving forward. In front of him, behind him. Everything was so enchanting, so magnificent. Li Tianlan was deeply immersed in it. On his way there was no magnificent general trend, no rising wind and surging clouds, only nature. Nature was the most beautiful. He began to become silent and quiet. Too many sceneries along the way were left behind by him, no matter whether he was willing or not. He didn't walk fast, but he never stopped his steps. From the mid-autumn festival to the late winter. He walked thousands of kilometers. A white robe, a red sword and a yellow dog. A silent and focused road, a pure and colorful life. He didn't know what year it was. He seemed to have forgotten martial arts. The Lin clan's famous sword, Divine Punishment, had been on his back, soaked with wind and frost, rain and snow. The scarlet long sword was stained with the color of the soil, mottled and no longer sharp. It was the first sunny day after the light snow in Liaodong. It was already snowing heavily in Guangdong. Li Tianlan finally realized that he was going north. All the way north. Snowflakes like goose feathers fluttered down in every corner, white and flawless. He continued to move forward. Taibai Mountain was in Guangdong. It would be on his way to becoming him, but it would not be his destination. He didn't have a destination, but now that he was here, he suddenly wanted to go to snow country and even go north. He liked snow. He liked the beauty and holiness of the world of ice and snow. Even if it was illusory, it still had a kind of enchanting charm. Under the heavy snow, Mount Taibai looked more and more misty. No one could see the city on the mountain. But in the vast snow, the entire Taibai mountain seemed to be sighing silently. Li Tianlan took out the badge that Tribulation gave him in Chongdao and put it on his chest. The badge was a piece of high-quality black jade. It was completely black with only a thin white line running through the entire black jade, like a ray of light in the darkness. At the foot of the mountain stood a tall stone tablet. The stone tablet was engraved with the words Military Restricted Zone, in bright red. Li Tianlan glanced at it and stepped up the mountain. The golden retriever wagged its tail and ran happily behind Li Tianlan. It was quiet and cold on the mountain road. Sai City must have arranged guards here, but perhaps because of the badge no one came out to stop him. From the foot of the mountain to the mountainside and then to the top. The wind and snow danced wildly. On the pale Taibai mountain, it seemed that even the snowflakes became cold and flamboyant. A figure finally appeared in Li Tianlan's sight. A man and a woman walked in the wind and snow. Li Tianlan only took a few steps, and the two had already appeared in front of him from a distance. Li Tianlan's face, which had been quiet and peaceful, finally showed a hint of a smile. He looked at the man in front of him. The man's face was still pale, but compared with a few months ago his essence, qi and spirit had begun to change subtly. Dressed in black, he stood on the snowy ground. His entire person was hidden like a snowflake, small and insignificant, but with an endless sharpness. Martial uncle. Li Tianlan bowed to Tribulation and said softly, "Long time no see. I heard from some spies at the foot of the mountain that a young man with a dog went up the mountain. I knew it was you, but I didn't expect you to come so late." Tribulation, who had returned from the Sky Academy, said in a calm tone, "Welcome home." I just passed by so I came up to have a look. Li Tianlan's voice was soft and condensed in the wind and snow. He had reached the top of the mountain. But he could not see Sai City from here. It was said that the city was very beautiful, but for that city he was a passerby rather than a returnee. Li Tianlan's eyes turned and fell on the woman beside Tribulation. It was a beautiful woman whose age could not be seen. Her age and appearance could not be seen. She wore a white robe and the loose robe covered her plump and soft figure. Her long black hair was casually coiled behind her head, and a golden mask covered most of her face. Li Tianlan could only see her eyes and beautiful lips, which were flashing with complex expressions. The woman stood in front of Li Tianlan, but it seemed that she was standing on the horizon. It was not that she deliberately alienated him. But Li Tianlan's almost uncontrollable keen perception kept reminding him of the huge gap in strength between him and the other party. The first impression she gave Li Tianlan was that she was gentle and mysterious, but the most straightforward feeling was that she was powerful. It was not just pure sharpness. She was powerful in all aspects. Zhou Xian, the hidden god of Zhongzhou State and the governor of Sai City. Li Tianlan bowed deeply to the woman who had helped him a lot when he met her for the first time today. For a moment he did not know what to say. Call her governor? It seemed too distant. But what else could he call her if not governor? Call me aunt. Zhou Xian took the initiative to speak. Her voice was ethereal and pleasant, as soft as the snow on the mountain. Aunt. Li Tianlan called her in a strange way. Zhou Xian nodded indifferently and said, "Let's go in and talk." Oh. Li Tianlan smiled and shook his head. His eyes were sincere. "I came here just to see you and Marshal Uncle. Now that I've seen you it's enough." He did not ask about Tribulation's injury. This was something that could be seen. Tribulation's injury was getting better, but he had not really recovered to his peak. "You're not coming back?" Zhou Xian asked softly. Not going in and not coming back were two completely different meanings. Li Tianlan was suddenly moved, but he still insisted on shaking his head. He pointed to the front, which was the direction of Sai City. "There is no freedom there." Sai City was beautiful. But there was a general trend there. It was not the general trend that he wanted, so there would be no freedom. Zhou Xian fell silent. She looked at Li Tianlan seriously. This was the meeting she had been looking forward to for a long time, but she never thought it would be so hasty. She had not seen enough and he was going to leave. Zhou Xian nodded. "What do you need?" "I'll ask someone to prepare it." "No need." Li Tianlan smiled. In a few months he had lost some weight and was taller. Now when he smiled, he had a natural and dazzling demeanor. "I'm fine like this." Tianlan, Tribulation paused and said calmly, "How are you recovering now?" This was probably a question that everyone in the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State knew. Even Li Tianlan himself wanted to know. So he shook his head and said softly, "I don't know." The astonishment in Tribulation's eyes flashed away. There was a smile in Zhou Xian's eyes. She looked at Li Tianlan and the modeled divine punishment behind him. Finally, her eyes fell on the cheerful golden retriever at Li Tianlan's feet. Zhou Xian thought for a while and then whispered, "If you don't want to come back, where do you want to go?" "North." Li Tianlan said. "Snow country." Zhou Xian raised her eyebrows slightly. She seemed to realize something and her tone suddenly became dignified. "Or do you want to go to the polar region?" "I haven't decided yet." Li Tianlan whispered, "The scenery in the north is very good. Want to have a look?" He faced the north. His way was in the north. Zhou Xian nodded. Li Tianlan moved his feet. Suddenly he seemed to think of something. He frowned slightly and hesitated. "Just say what you want to say. As long as Sai City can do it." Zhou Xian looked at Li Tianlan. Her eyes were beautiful and complicated. "Aunt," Li Tianlan called her and said slowly, "If I can, I want to see your martial arts." He had seen the Buddhist incantation of 9 words of tribulation. But he had never seen Zhou Xian make a move. But this was very important to him. Zhou Xian looked at Li Tianlan in surprise and nodded. "Okay." Li Tianlan did not say thank you. Too many times these 2 words seemed to be very weak. Zhou Xian thought about it. She reached out her hand and stepped forward. In an instant the cold wind on the top of Mount Taibai suddenly disappeared. Only the flying snowflakes were still floating in the air. Situ Songyue moved forward again. Her body soared into the air. In silence, countless snowflakes followed her figure and went up against the wind. There seemed to be countless snow dragons on the top of Mount Taibai. Situ Songyue spun in the heavy snow. Snowflakes danced around her. But the area around her had already become a pure void. That was Situ Songyue's domain. It was not darkness but light. The vast snow seemed to become light, covering everything. Situ Songyue's figure also disappeared in a vast expanse. Whether it was the extreme darkness or the extreme light, once it reached the extreme there was no difference in essence. Situ Songyue's figure slowly fell. The light in the void converged and a large number of snowflakes spread in all directions in an instant. The wind was whistling. Snowflakes swept over the mountains. Endless snow waves rushed up to the sky, messy and broken. Li Tianlan was silent. When I fight, the surrounding is my world and moves with me. Situ Songyue said calmly. It was Situ Songyue's world. Naturally it was useless to the opponent. Useless heaven and earth. Li Tianlan nodded. There should be another move ahead. In this uselessness of heaven and earth he saw too many familiar things. Its all-embracing collection. Situ Songyue nodded. There is also a half-move behind called immortality. All-embracing collection. All-embracing collection. Li Tianlan smiled and whispered, it changes but it's still the 24 moves of sword. Situ Songyue did not speak. Li Tianlan waved his hand and went straight down the mountain. The golden retriever still followed him, shaking its head and wagging its tail. Tribulation looked at Li Tianlan's back and frowned slightly. Is he really going to the polar ground? Only in the most extreme environment can the most perfect breakthrough be made. Situ Songyue looked at Li Tianlan's back and whispered, as far as I know many years ago, someone successfully broke through in the polar ground. He didn't start over but directly broke through to the invincible realm. Tribulation raised his eyebrows. He had been pursuing his own martial arts and didn't know much about these things. Chapter 284. Wang Tianzong was looking at the sea. The sea was turbulent. The sword intent around him seemed to be turbulent with the sea. Across the sea was snow country, which was also the direction Wang Tianzong was looking at. He had been standing here for nearly 24 hours. The sun rose and the moon set. The cold sea breeze whistled past. The black coat was fluttering vividly in the wind. Wang Tianzong was motionless like a statue. Here was Beihai Province. Here was Mount Dibing. It was the highest place on Mount Dibing. Flowers and plants flourished all year round on Mount Dibing, but there was no bright color here. Rocks. Only rocks. The rock path from the bottom to the top connected to the stone platform at the top. After hundreds of years of wind and rain, countless rocks looked old and weathered. The highest stone platform was not large, with an area of hundreds of square meters. A stone tablet with a height of tens of meters stood at the highest point of the whole Mount Dibing, perfectly integrated with the surrounding rocks, looking hard and boundless. The sky was gloomy. The sea was gloomy. The ancient stone platform between the sky and the sea was getting darker. The sound of waves and the sea breeze whistled together. Wang Tianzong stood on the stone platform with a silent face. The scene was solemn. Solemnity was also a kind of hesitation. Wang Xingxiao slowly climbed the stone platform from the foot of the mountain and looked at his father in his sight. He did not speak but first bowed to the tall stone tablet behind Wang Tianzong seriously, and then whispered, Dad, Mom asked me to call you back. She made soup for you. Oh. Wang Tianzong shook his head and said quietly, I want to be alone. Wang Xingxiao was a little embarrassed and helpless. Has your second uncle come back? Wang Tianzong suddenly asked. Yes. Wang Xingxiao was stunned. He went up the mountain this morning. I heard that you were here so I didn't come to bother you. Wang Tianzong was silent for a while and said, Call him here. Wang Xingxiao answered and took out his mobile phone to make a call. As the Sword Emperor of Zhongzhou State, Wang Tianzong was different from other big shots in many aspects. The most different was that Wang Tianzong did not have his own study. In other words, his study did not have the significance of the existence of other studies. Wang Tianzong rarely read books and rarely reviewed documents in the study. He rarely talked with others in the study. He was also too lazy to stay in the study to think about life. That so-called study was just a decoration. Wang Tianzong preferred the current stone platform. This place had the peace he wanted and also the glory he wanted. This was the forbidden area of the entire Mount Dibing, named the Stage of Formidable Person. It was a place where all the ups and downs, glory and brilliance of the Wang family of Beihai for hundreds of years were gathered. Wang Tianzong turned around and looked at the stone tablet in the center of the Stage of Formidable Person. The stone tablet looked desolate under the gloomy sky. This was the famous stone of Formidable Person in the Dark World. Countless names were carved on the stone of Formidable Person. Some of the names had already dimmed, but they still shone brightly in the long river of history. There were many names, but compared to the stone of Formidable Person, they only occupied a small portion. Some of the names on it were ancestors of the Wang family of Beihai, some were pioneers of Zhongzhou state, some were invincible figures in the Dark World, and some were giants in business and politics. The ancestors of the Lin clan were also there. The seniors of the Li family were also there. For hundreds of years, those who had made great contributions to the Wang family of Beihai were all on it. Glory, pride, romance, prosperity, all the lights of the Wang family of Beihai were gathered here. Wang Tianzong gently stroked the stone tablet in front of him. His expression was affectionate with sincere awe. The waves hit the Stage of Formidable Person. On the Stage of Formidable Person, the contemporary hero of the Wang family of Beihai faced the stone of Formidable Person. It was like facing the past today. It was lonely. The future of the Wang family of Beihai will be yours after all. Wang Tianzong didn't look back and said softly, "You have to shoulder the future of the Wang family of Beihai." Wang Xingxiao rarely saw his father like this. He nodded and said in a deep voice, "Don't worry, father. Li Tianlong refused me, so I brought Yuetong back." Wang Tianzong sighed softly with undisguised regret. If he agreed to come to Mount Dibing in the future in the Dark World in the next decades, who will be your opponent? Wang Xingxiao didn't say anything. His mind was always calm, so he didn't have any hostility when mentioning Li Tianlong. But hearing this name, Wang Xingxiao always thought of the day in Chongdao when he bowed in front of Li Tianlong. His eyes were calm and he said softly, "We are opponents." Opponent? Wang Tianzong raised his eyebrows. "You have no opponent, at least not now. Who knows where Li Tianlong is? If he doesn't show up, you have no opponent. If he shows up, you may not be his opponent." Wang Xingxiao raised his eyebrows. He was a little dissatisfied, but he didn't dare to say anything. The entire Wang family of Beihai had a headache because of Li Tianlong's disappearance recently. Although Wang Xingxiao rarely left the Wang family of Beihai, he had a clear view of the overall situation of Zhongzhou state. Li Tianlong became famous after the battle in Heaven Capital. His resurrection greatly stimulated the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City. So the two sides cooperated to promote the reform of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou state. The Southeast Special Warfare Headquarters was the result of the reform. But now the reform had taken place and Li Tianlong disappeared. In this way, although both Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai gained a lot of benefits because of the reform, the relationship between the two sides seemed to become subtle after they lost the target that they could target. A few months had passed. Although the Southeast Special Warfare Headquarters had been established, the follow-up action had to be temporarily put on hold for various reasons. There were also different voices inside the Wang family of Beihai. The special warfare system began to become chaotic. Now his father asked him to call second uncle over, probably to talk about these things. "Dad, after the spring festival, if I have nothing to do, I want to go out for a walk." Wang Xingxiao was silent for a while and said softly. He was now in the thunder-shocking realm. Although he had just broken through the realm for less than a year, his combat capability was close to the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, and he was not even an individual expert a half-step to the invincible realm. In this special and sensitive period, Wang Xingxiao needed to pursue his own path, find the most suitable martial arts for himself, and prepare for breaking through to the invincible realm in the future. "You are the future of the Wang family of Beihai. Now I'm here, you can go if you want." Wang Tianzong said softly. Wang Xingxiao nodded. In his sight, Wang Xiaoyao's figure had appeared on the Stage of Formidable Person. He called second uncle. Wang Xiaoyao nodded. He looked at Wang Tianzong and said, "Brother. What's the matter?" "The patriarch of the Lolita family is dead," Wang Tianzong said. Wang Xiaoyao and Wang Xingxiao were stunned at the same time. This news was not a secret. In the past 2 days it had spread all over the world. But the two did not expect that Wang Tianzong's first sentence was not domestic but abroad. The Lolita family was a wealthy family in Snow Country and one of the energy oligarchs in Snow Country. It was powerful. Similarly, this family was also an important part of the Polar Ground Alliance. The Polar Ground Alliance was an alliance. Its internal structure was not like that of other forces. On the contrary, it was a loose but extremely large organization. The Lolita family could be said to be an extremely important node in the Polar Ground Alliance. However, Wang Xiaoyao was a little annoyed. I know this news. It is said that they seized power internally and the method is very clean. It seems to have nothing to do with us, right? The method is very clean. Wang Tianzong smiled. Maybe there is a cleaner method that we can't see. He glanced at Wang Xiaoyao and suddenly said, "What do you think of the Samsara Palace?" The Samsara Palace. Wang Xiaoyao was a little hesitant, a little sad and a little missing. For a moment he could not speak. Because you used to please Qin Weibai, we have cooperated with the Samsara Palace several times. So we can roughly figure out some forces in the Samsara Palace. And from behind these forces, we can roughly see some of Qin Weibai's methods. Wang Tianzong thought of Qin Weibai's beautiful face and sighed softly. He was even old enough to be Qin Weibai's father, so he did not think about beauty. He just marveled at her methods. It could be said that she was the most peculiar woman he had ever seen in his life. If she was willing to marry Xiaoyao. What a pity, what a pity. Brother, do you suspect that little Bai is behind the Lolita family's affairs? Wang Xiaoyao frowned. I can't see her or anyone's shadow. It happens so quickly and so cleanly that it makes people uneasy. Wang Tianzong said softly. He now controlled several subordinate families of the Samsara Palace. Coincidentally, those families had experienced a great change similar to the seizure of power a few years ago. Everything looked clean, but afterward, no one knew that they had joined the Samsara Palace. Listening to the thunder in silence. This method was too quiet and clean. The Lolita family, which had been very stable in recent years, suddenly did this. He had to be vigilant. But, even if the Samsara Palace takes action against the Polar Ground Alliance, it has nothing to do with us. The Samsara Palace is cooperating with the Purgatory of Heaven Capital. Wang Tianzong interrupted Wang Xiaoyao. The Purgatory of Heaven Capital occupies East Island. If the Samsara Palace takes Snow Country, what will the Wang family of Beihai do? Wang Xiaoyao was stunned and his face changed dramatically. The Purgatory of Heaven Capital occupied East Island. If the Samsara Palace took Snow Country, the Wang family of Beihai was right between East Island and Snow Country. At that time, if the two superpowers declared war on the Wang family of Beihai at the same time, it seemed that both Snow Country and East Island had reasons to support the two superpowers. What a big trap. Wake up. Wang Tianzong looked at Wang Xiaoyao. We will not be friends. You must be clear about this. Neither the Purgatory of Heaven Capital nor the Samsara Palace are friends for us. Not friends. Naturally they were enemies. Wang Xiaoyao's face was complicated. He wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Wang Tianzong knew what he wanted to ask but he didn't answer. From the moment he saw Deity's sword in Heaven Capital, he knew that he and the Purgatory of Heaven Capital were not friends. It was also on that night. In that cold and decisive sword light, he also recognized the sword of the master of Samsara Palace. So Wang Tianzong also knew that he and the Samsara Palace would not be friends. Wang Tianzong really regretted that Li Tianlong refused the Wang family of Beihai. Not only for himself but also for Li Tianlong himself. The heavenly son of Zhongzhou state would eventually become a tragedy. Wang Tianzong's eyes were full of mockery. The Wang family of Beihai. The Li family. Kunlun City. There was nothing noble or despicable about it. Everyone wanted something so they would naturally take action. Is there any news about Li Tianlong? Wang Tianzong asked. Since Li Tianlong left Huating, the Wang family of Beihai had always attached great importance to tracking him. But there was still no exact information. Wang Xiaoyao shook his head and whispered, I'm still looking for him. Wang Tianzong agreed and suddenly said thoughtfully, How is Ning Xuan doing recently? Wang Xiaoyao's eyes narrowed and he looked up at Wang Tianzong. Ning Xuan, commander of the Eastern Theater of Operations of Zhongzhou State. One of the core figures of the Southeast Group. Recently, there had been voices in the Southeast group asking the group to accept the Li family again and restore the time when the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family coexisted. Some influential people also vaguely expressed their opinions. And Ning Ziyuan was one of the louder voices among these people. No one was surprised by his attitude, because Ning Ziyuan was promoted by the father and son of the Li family. Only Wang Tianzong was surprised, because his attitude was too normal, it seemed abnormal in his eyes. Not bad. Wang Xiaoyao replied cautiously, "Brother, don't worry. I will persuade him." Wang Tianzong took a deep look at Wang Xiaoyao, nodded and said, "3 things recently. First, summarize all the information about Snow Country in detail and increase the investment in Snow Country. Second, finally Tianlong. Third, inform Tyrant of the Polar Ground Alliance and invite him to visit the Wang family of Beihai." Wang Xiaoyao nodded and suddenly said, "Brother, Yuetong, I'll tell her in person." Wang Tianzong waved his hand expressionlessly. Wang Xiaoyao said no more and walked down the stage of Formidable Person with Wang Xingxiao. Wang Tianzong didn't look at Snow Country anymore. He stood in front of the stone of Formidable Person, reached out and gently touched the huge stone with too many meanings in front of him. It was silent. Wang Xingxiao looked back on the way down the mountain. The stone of Formidable Person in his sight was very big. His father's figure was very small. He watched his father reach out and touch the stone tablet. It was a kind of careful caution and awe emanating from his bones. Perhaps only the Sword Emperor standing on the stage of Formidable Person was the real Sword Emperor. Wang Xingxiao watched quietly. On the stage of Formidable Person, the Sword Emperor took off the invincible halo. What was revealed was fear, cowardice, carefulness, prudence and hesitation. For the first time Wang Xingxiao felt the weight on his shoulders. He suddenly remembered his father in his memory. It seemed that as long as he could remember, Wang Tianzong had never smiled much in his impression. He had always been calm and silent. One person, one sword, he carried the entire Wang family of Beihai on his weak shoulders and sprinted to the top. That position was too high. The road to the top was a dangerous one with no way out. He couldn't retreat because behind him were tens of millions of people of Beihai province, hundreds of thousands of troops of Beihai province, and the rise and fall of the entire Wang family of Beihai. He couldn't retreat and he didn't dare to retreat. So he was invincible, but he rarely really relaxed. Under the invincible halo he was not high-spirited, free or doing whatever he wanted. He was really cautious, even timid. The scenery at the top of the world might be wonderful. But he was not complacent. Chapter 285. New Year's Eve was coming. It snowed heavily in Beihai province. Auspicious snow heralded a bumper harvest. The falling snowflakes seemed to fade away on Mount Dibing. Mount Dibing was pure white, holy and elegant. It was still snowing. Wang Yuetong stood on the wide balcony and looked at the dancing snowflakes outside, lost in thought. In the middle of the year she had made an appointment with several good friends to go skiing in the Celestial and Human Canyon in Kanglan City. But those friends had never contacted her since she came back. Mount Dibing was near Xingzhou, the capital of Beihai province. Wang Yuetong had returned to the Wang family of Beihai from Huating for a few months. She hadn't even been to Xingzhou. How could she have the mood to go skiing in Kanglan City hundreds of miles away? Wang Yuetong became more and more silent. She never went down the mountain and seldom went out. After coming back from Huating, she seemed to have completely closed herself up. Without any entertainment activities, she meditated and cultivated in silence every day. When she was tired, she watched a movie, rested, slept, and ate. Day after day. Everyone knew that the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai had returned to Mount Dibing, but few people could see her. The lights in the exquisite palace where she lived were on. That seemed to be the only difference between before and after the little princess came back. Autumn and winter were alternating. Winter was about to pass. Wang Yuetong was still quiet and still silent. The most delicate flower of the Wang family of Beihai had bloomed in every corner of Mount Dibing, but now she chose to bloom in her own space. She had never withered, but she was a little more proud and stubborn than before. That was her struggle. Although she knew early on that there would be no result. The cold wind poured into the balcony from the open window and rushed into the room. The hazy gauze curtain in the room danced with the cold wind. Wang Yuetong faced the wind and snow. Her fresh and refined little face was more attractive. A beautiful young woman in her early 30s walked into the room and looked at Wang Yuetong, who was wearing thin clothes on the balcony. She sighed, took a coat from the wardrobe, walked over and put it on Wang Yuetong. She said helplessly, "Wicked girl, no matter how dissatisfied you are, you can't make fun of your health, can you? If you catch a cold, I will take care of you. Your father has been very busy recently. I think he has almost forgotten about us. Do you still expect him to feel sorry for you?" The young woman was extremely beautiful, with a mature and enchanting figure. The charm of a woman was vividly reflected in her. She was wearing light-colored cotton pajamas and her hair was playing. Standing in front of Wang Yuetong without makeup, she looked like a pair of sisters. But in reality they were mother and daughter. "Mom, I've entered the fire-flaming realm. I won't catch a cold even if it's a little cold." Wang Yuetong looked at her mother in front of her and said in an intimate tone, "I don't understand your profound martial arts." The woman smiled, and there was an indescribable gentleness in her smile. "The weather is cold and it's not good to wear too little. I've made some soup, come and have a bowl." Wang Yuetong said. Just as she was about to turn around, the woman chuckled. That heartless man is here. Go and welcome him." Wang Yuetong turned around subconsciously. In his sight, Wang Tianzong's calm and silent figure was stepping on the wind and snow all over the sky and had already arrived outside the hall. Beside him was a young man about 25 or 26 years old. The young man looked ordinary, but he looked gentle and elegant. Wang Yuetong seemed to suddenly understand something. Her face was a little pale and she suddenly felt cold. "I won't go." Wang Yuetong bit her red lips hard. Her face was as white and transparent as the snow outside. The woman looked at her daughter's stubborn and aggrieved face, and then looked at the young man beside her husband outside the hall. She shook her head and said softly, "Maybe it's not what you think. Anyway, I have to go and have a look." Wang Yuetong just shook her head and said nothing. The woman reached out her hand and gently touched Wang Yuetong's hair. Her tone was softer. "In fact, even if it's what you think, it's not necessarily a bad thing. That young man is your Uncle Wu's son. Don't you trust your father's judgment?" "I haven't seen the boy named Li Tianlon, but I have a vague impression of him from what you said these days and the rumors outside. He's the most outstanding young man in Zhongzhou State today, isn't he? It's normal that you like him. But since your father objects to you two being together, he must have his reasons." The woman's eyes were soft and calm. "Tong, you should believe your father. The person he chooses may not be the best, but he must be the most suitable for you. Based on your father's character, it's impossible for him to hand you over simply for interests. Now there is no one in the world who deserves this. I just want senior brother Tianlon." Wang Yuetong shook her head, looking stubborn. The woman chuckled as if she was looking at a shameless child. "But senior brother Tianlon isn't yours. No one can deny his excellence, but for you he's really not a good match. The descendant of the Li family, this identity can represent too many things. Nowadays the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State is the era of Kunlun City. No matter how strong the Li family was back then, 20 years is enough to change everything. In fact, Li Tianlon's excellence is what worries me the most. People who are too outstanding will not be willing to be ordinary. He carries too many things on his back and has such a talent, so from the beginning he won't have a way out. He has to keep moving forward and reverse the general trend alone. In such a process, no matter whether he wins or loses, it will be too tragic. He may gain a lot, but he is also destined to lose a lot. It's magnificent. Ups and downs, turbulent winds and scudding clouds, these may be very good words for men. But for women, happiness and stability are the most important. Not to mention that Li Tianlon is still on the opposite side of us. Even if he is willing to join the Wang family of Beihai, in my heart, I actually don't want you to be with him." She looked at her daughter in a trance and muttered to herself, "The more beautiful the women around the giants are, the more sad they are." "Mom, are you talking about yourself?" Wang Yuetong looked at the woman's eyes and asked. The woman was stunned and then chuckled. "Of course not. Although your father is also a giant, the Wang family of Beihai doesn't have to go against the general trend. He may be under a lot of pressure, but he has never lost his temper with me. We don't have to worry about survival. Why should I be sad? But Li Tianlon is different. If he wants to survive, he has to go against the trend. You may be glorious by his side, but you won't be happy. You won't understand." Wang Yuetong whispered. The Wang family of Beihai has been in a high position these years. It's so high that even I can see too many things clearly. I've seen a lot of things. I've seen the so-called forbearance of those who sacrifice their loved ones for the sake of interests, and the so-called sacrifice of those who would rather abandon their wives and children for survival. I've seen too many. And Tianlon. Her eyes were a little dazed. He was the first man I met who would stand behind me when I was in danger. She chuckled. And at that time he already knew my identity. My identity was not friendly to him, but even so he still stood in front of me. That's because you had never been in danger before. The woman didn't know whether to laugh or cry. If you were in danger, too many people would be willing to do so. It's different. Wang Yuetong said quietly, because at that time he knew very well that even if he helped me block the danger, he would not get any benefits. When the woman was about to speak, the voice of Wang Tianzong, who had been pressing the doorbell for a long time, rang directly from outside the hall. He said calmly and indifferently, "Summer solstice, open the door." The woman responded subconsciously. She touched her daughter's hair and turned to go downstairs. Wang Yuetong bit her lip tightly. Her eyes looked out of the door as if she had suddenly made up her mind. She put on her coat and went downstairs. In the living room on the first floor of the hall, Wang Tianzong had walked in with a young man. Summer Solstice was talking to the young man with a chuckle. Wang Tianzong was about to go upstairs. He saw Wang Yuetong coming down. He subconsciously froze. That Wang Yuetong took the initiative to greet him. Wang Tianzong's facial muscles softened a little. He nodded and said, "Come down." Wang Yuetong followed Wang Tianzong with a calm face. The young man chatting with Summer Solstice with a respectful face also stood up. Seeing Wang Yuetong, who was still beautiful without any makeup, his eyes obviously brightened. Then he smiled and said, "Yuetong, long time no see. I'm Wu Qiong. When I was a child I often took you to Shizhou to play." "I know." Wang Yuetong nodded with a chuckle. "Brother Wu, I heard that you went to Star State for further study? Did you just go home?" "Yes." Wu Qiong smiled and looked emotional. "I haven't been back for almost 10 years. Little Wu won't leave this time. I will arrange a position for him in Xingzhou in the near future. But you're all young people. You should communicate more in the future." Wang Tianzong whispered, "Your Uncle Wu has been looking forward to you being his daughter-in-law. He has said this for many years. I saw little Wu a few days ago. He is really a good kid." "Uncle, you flatter me." Wu Qiong quickly bowed. Wang Yuetong looked at Wu Qiong. Her eyes were quiet. The Wu family was one of the rich families in Beihai. Wu Qiong's father was Wu Qiu. He was not famous in the dark world, but in terms of strength he was definitely the top expert in the Wang family of Beihai. He controlled the internal security forces on Mount Dibing and could be said to be Wang Tianzong's most trusted right-hand man. Wang Yuetong also had a good impression of Uncle Wu. But she had never thought about being Uncle Wu's daughter-in-law. Although she had heard such jokes many times. "Father, do you mean to unite with the Wu family by marriage?" Wang Yuetong asked straightforwardly. "It's not a marriage." Wang Tianzong frowned. "Wu Qiong is good. You can try to date him for a period of time. There is no if." Wang Yuetong said indifferently, "I won't marry into the Wu family, so there is no need to try." It could be imagined how embarrassing it was to say this directly in front of the person involved. Wu Qiong's face turned red and he couldn't speak for a while. "Why, Tong, don't be too capricious." Summer Solstice sat aside and wanted to smooth things over. But Wang Yuetong had made up her mind to make a big scene. "Why?" she asked in reply and then looked directly at Wu Qiong. "Brother Wu, do you want to know why?" Wu Qiong's face turned red, but he still insisted on nodding. It was a great honor for the whole Wu family to be able to marry the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai. How could he accept it? "Guys here." Wang Yuetong pointed to her mouth and chuckled. Her mouth was small, red and soft. Wang Yuetong's smile was beautiful and enchanting. "Because I have eaten from senior brother Tianlon." Her face was blushing but her eyes were unusually brave. She thought for a moment and described, "It's that I am naked and kneeling in front of him, and then I have eaten from there." He was confused. Wu Qiong was confused. Summer Solstice was confused. Wang Tianzong was confused too. The three of them stared at Wang Yuetong, who was blushing but talking happily. For a moment they didn't know how to react. "Anyway, I have eaten from there in the Sky Academy." Wang Yuetong looked at Wu Qiong. That's the reason. I have eaten from senior brother Tianlon, so my mouth can't say, I love you, or, I want to other men. Because I want to be shameless. Chapter 286. After leaving Sai City, Snow Country was less than 500 kilometers away. Snow Country was magnificent. In winter, snow fell continuously. The weather was cold and the ground was frozen. Everywhere was desolate and quiet. All the way north, Li Tianlon's footsteps finally began to slow down. At the border of Snow Country he began his first meditation since he set out. In the whistling wind and snow he meditated for 16 hours. Li Tianlon's figure seemed to completely disappear from the world and became completely illusory. Li Tianlon became more and more silent. He shuttled through the primeval forest at the border between Zhongzhou State and Snow Country. There were only trees and wind and snow in front of him. The world was quiet. Silence was freedom. The golden retriever named Baby grew up every day. The icy and snowy environment didn't seem to bother it at all. Followed Li Tianlon all the time, carefree and natural. The golden retriever was the only person Li Tianlon could talk to. But Li Tianlon talked less and less. He was so quiet that he seemed to be integrated with the coldness of Snow Country. Thousands of words and ambitions before departure disappeared bit by bit. Silence. Silence. Concentration. Pure. Watching the flying snow and listening to the cold wind. He meditated for longer and longer periods of time and more frequently. Most of the time every day, Li Tianlon would sit in the forest and explore his martial arts. The primeval forest was lush with trees. The snow outside stopped and began to fall again. Whether it stopped or fell. Because a lot of snow had accumulated on the trunks of the forest, the snowflakes in the forest were falling all day long. The snowflakes fell from the trees and drowned Li Tianlon in meditation. So most of the time every day, there would be a snowman sitting quietly beside the golden retriever, silent and motionless. There was not much food in the forest in winter, but as long as he looked for it, there would always be food. When not meditating, Li Tianlon was a hunter. Rabbits in winter were generally easy to catch. The man and the dog ate a lot of rabbit meat, and Li Tianlon's barbecue skills gradually became better. He began to try to train the golden retriever. He was indeed a very intelligent dog. A good pet dog was gradually trained by him into a hunting dog. Maybe it was not qualified, but the golden retriever had learned to catch some relatively easy small animals in winter. So Li Tianlon changed from a hunter to a chef. The golden retriever gave the prey to Li Tianlon, and Li Tianlon processed it and ate it. Meditation. Moving forward. Cooking, survival. There were also times when the golden retriever didn't get anything. That day the man and the dog could only starve. The beginning of winter passed and soon it was deep winter. The man was thin and so was the dog. But for the first time, a trace of illusory sword intent appeared on Li Tianlon. It was as if he was born with a sword intent that had perfectly integrated with his entire body, similar to his temperament. Li Tianlon walked slower and slower. He still did not draw his sword. The famous sword Heavenly Punishment had been hanging on his back all this time. It had been eroded by the wind and snow, looking even more ancient. Li Tianlon occasionally stroked the hilt and scabbard, but he never thought of pulling them out. Because the sound of the sword being drawn was too loud. Because the sword light was too bright. Li Tianlon wanted silence. The snowstorm in the primeval forest seemed to have become a part of his life. This kind of peace was like heaven to him. A man and a dog spent their first spring festival in the primeval forest of Guangbao. There were no lights or hustle and bustle. Li Tianlon, who had thrown away his phone, could not get any information from the outside world. New Year's Eve. On the day of reunion. What he faced was only the snowstorm that filled the forest. He started a fire in the most primitive way in the forest. The orange-red flames swayed in the surrounding snow, bringing with them smoke and dust. The fire illuminated Li Tianlon's face. The surrounding forest was still hazy and dark in the snow. The grown-up golden retriever lay between Li Tianlon and the fire, wagging its tail. Its furry tail swept on Li Tianlon's calf. So lonely, so quiet, so enjoyable. The sword intent seemed to gradually light up in the fire. He gently stroked the head of the golden retriever. The fire burned and then went out. From New Year's Eve to New Year's, Li Tianlon, who was already 20 years old, stepped out of the primeval forest of Snow Country with the dog. To the north, continued to the north. He rarely stayed in the cities of snow country. Many of his supplies were even replenished in the small towns near the urban area. Winter had passed. But all the way to the north the weather in snow country was getting colder and colder. Li Tianlan still did not drive. He just walked step by step on the journey of tens of thousands of miles. He was not pursuing. He was just walking on his own lonely road. That was his cultivation. It was still snowing in the spring in the center of snow country. It was snowing heavily. It was nearly 40 degrees below zero in spring. In the flying snow, Li Tianlan took off his shoes and stepped barefoot in the snow. The golden retriever ran happily around him. Li Tianlan's eyes were always calm and firm. The snow was very cold. But every step he took, Li Tianlan could feel the power. The power of the earth. Snow country was vast. The endless flying snow finally stopped. Li Tianlan saw the surging and towering rivers and mountains of snow country and the flowing sea. He walked behind time. So spring had passed. Snow country entered the cool midsummer. Li Tianlan's meditation time decreased from long to short. He was still dressed in white, walking barefoot on the land of snow country. The white clothes made of cloud silk were not dirty or faded at all. They were still as clear and bright as before. The beard at the corner of Li Tianlan's mouth was getting longer and longer, and the beard on his chin was hanging down dark. His hair covered the back of his head and began to fall to his shoulders. He still carried divine punishment on his back. The famous sword that carried the sword intent of the ancestors of Xianyuan and the masters of the Lin clan began to tremble on his back. Li Tianlan's world once again heard the sound of the long sword clanging. He approached the desert of snow country. He also stopped in the desert of snow country for the time being. He stopped by the Volga River in snow country. So the golden retriever began to eat fish. He'd even go into the water to catch fish. The long sword on Li Tianlan's back trembled every day, but he didn't seem to notice it. He just soaked his calloused feet in the water every day and looked up at the sky. The sky of snow country was very clear. It was a natural magnificence. The golden retriever began to move farther and farther away from Li Tianlan and no longer stuck to him. Its eyes occasionally showed humanized fear. It often stared at the long sword on Li Tianlan's back and occasionally barked in a low voice. The summer began to pass. The bleak autumn day made people feel more lonely in snow country. The golden retriever, who had eaten too much fish and wanted to vomit, bit Li Tianlan's sleeve with its mouth many times. Li Tianlan finally stopped being in a daze by the river. He prepared enough clean water, crossed the Volga River, and directly entered the desert of snow country on a sunny day. The white robe disappeared in the vast expanse of yellow sand. The storm began to enter the desert. Divine punishment on Li Tianlan's back became completely quiet and no longer trembled. After the sandstorm, the barren desert became even quieter. The scenery was the same. A person who never changes. A dog that never changes. Li Tianlan's eyes became completely clear. He was not in a daze, nor was he meditating. He was getting faster and faster. The golden retriever seemed to be unable to stand the sometimes hot and sometimes cold yellow sand in the desert. His pace was a little staggered and became listless. Li Tianlan simply wrapped the golden retriever's limbs with gauze. Finally, he simply carried it on his back and continued to move forward. He stepped barefoot in the yellow sand with a deep and firm sense of strength. A deep line of footprints was left in the quiet desert, spreading far and wide. A gale gradually rose in the desert. The yellow sand that seemed to wreak havoc in the whole world flew wildly in the desert. The wind rose and fell. The yellow sand fell. The deep footprints that spread out in the desert were still there, clear and deep, without any change. At the end of the desert was the grassland of snow country. Cattle and sheep were everywhere. His short hair had become long. Li Tianlan, whose short beard had become long, finally stopped being silent. He still didn't talk much, but he occasionally chatted with the golden retriever. During the journey of tens of thousands of miles, the man and the dog had already developed a deep relationship. Although the intelligent golden retriever couldn't speak, it often responded to Li Tianlan with its actions. So the loneliness gradually faded away. A smile appeared on Li Tianlan's face. The illusory sword intent surrounded him and completely became his own temperament, making him seem to have a sense of alienation from the whole world. But he smiled happily. Behind this focused and pure smile, he seemed to forget something. Or in other words, he didn't want to think about it for the time being. The grassland deep in snow country was bitterly cold. In this environment where they didn't have to worry about food and supplies, the man and the dog became more and more energetic. In the coldness that could almost obliterate everything, Li Tianlong and the golden retriever spent the second New Year's Eve in the cold wind. A trace of white gradually appeared in the distant sky of the night. That was not the dawn of the new year. It was the glacier. That was the color of the polar region. Li Tianlong led the dog and continued to move forward. The polar region in the north was not a continent. It was the sea. And there were countless islands covered by glaciers. The new year began to pass gradually. Spring was coming. Li Tianlong's world became dark. There was no more sunshine. There was only night and the cold moon all day long. It was the polar night in the polar region. For a few months, it would be shrouded in darkness 24 hours a day. Li Tianlong and the golden retriever arrived at the seaside of the Arctic Ocean. The glacier was in sight. It was the closest one to him. The seawater rose and fell under Li Tianlong's feet. Li Tianlong looked at the glacier in the distance silently. In the night, the man, the dog, and the sword were quiet. They were all extreme. He reached out his hand, pointed at the glacier in the night, and whispered, "Baby, let's go and have a look." The golden retriever whimpered and seemed to understand Li Tianlong's words. It went around to Li Tianlong's back and jumped directly on his back. It was next to the divine punishment. The divine punishment was silent, not sharp and not cold. Li Tianlong stepped forward. His footsteps stepped on the water, causing irregular ripples. He was very fast. He walked farther and farther on the sea, deeper and deeper. The waves rolled and fluctuated under his feet. Li Tianlong moved forward with a calm face. He walked on the sea. He walked on the sea. He let the waves roll, neither sinking nor rising. The polar night in the Arctic Ocean was still the same. The darkness seemed to be endless. Li Tianlong walked silently. He walked from the border of Zhou state to the prosperous Huating, and finally shone his most dazzling light in heaven capital. All the light seemed to have faded away into the past. It had been nearly 2 years. Chapter 287. He floated along with the waves like a wanderer without any direction. Li Tianlong really didn't need directions. What he needed was silence. Whether it was freezing cold or scorching hot, whether it was hell or heaven, peace was enough. Only the quietest environment could temper the purest and most focused willpower. That was the power he needed, and it would also become his unbreakable martial arts foundation. In the polar region of the polar night, it was dark day and night. Time had lost its meaning. Li Tianlong, who had completely let go of everything, passed by the glacier and walked on the sea like a ghost, ethereal and illusory. The polar region was rich in resources. Resources meant benefits. Therefore, the edge of the polar region was not as deserted as imagined. Every country had its own workstation. Regardless of whether it was the polar day or the polar night, the edge of the polar region was always noisy. He continued to move forward. In the darkness, in his world, the lights of the workstation began to fade away, disappear, and finally disappear completely. A lonely and cold glacier. Deep darkness. The biting cold wind and snow. This was Li Tianlong's path. He walked quietly as if he would walk until the end of time. The polar region was huge. In a world of ice and snow, there was an endless sea and undulating glaciers. Li Tianlong didn't know how long he had been walking. His world was getting quieter and quieter. Wind, snow, and glaciers gradually became everything. The darkness of the polar night began to dissipate. The sun rose and the moon set in the polar region, and the day and night alternated. Li Tianlong boarded an island covered with glaciers. His footsteps finally stopped. It wasn't that he didn't want to move forward. This was the first time his body had a problem after walking for thousands of miles. A sharp pain engulfed his entire body without warning. It was as if his body, which had long been assimilated by the surrounding cold temperature, began to feel the extreme cold. Pain coursed through his body. Li Tianlong clearly felt that his body was becoming stiff little by little. The severe pain and coldness tore at his body as if they wanted to crush every inch of his flesh and blood. He fell shivering on the glittering and gloomy glacier. There was only a fully grown golden retriever by his side. He subconsciously held the golden retriever in his arms. The golden retriever meekly curled up in his arms and occasionally licked his face. His spirit gradually became absent-minded in the pain, but Li Tianlan gritted his teeth and held on. His condition was not good enough for him to hunt for food in the polar regions. The man and the dog could only starve. His body temperature began to decrease. But Li Tianlan gradually felt the heat. It was as if the coldness originated from within his body. The glacier in his body seemed to have completely melted, and then turned into an erupting volcano. A high temperature was brewing in his body. The pain became numb in the heat. Li Tianlan began to feel itchy. That kind of crazy itch seemed to seep out from the bones, first his legs, then his arms. His limbs felt like there were countless ants crawling under his skin. Li Tianlan, who had been maintaining a trace of clarity, completely collapsed in the shortest time possible. There was only silence in the polar region. Only his unbearable roar reverberated across the glacier. He rolled and struggled on the thick layer of ice, his clean fingers stabbing into the thick layer of ice. Helpless howls filled with despair echoed across the desolate glacier, occasionally accompanied by the barking of a dog. His limbs felt as if they were about to be completely crippled. The indescribable pain and itch were constantly eroding his nerves. Li Tianlan exhausted his remaining strength and fell into a coma on the glacier. The sun rose and the moon set. This was the warmest time in the polar region. The average temperature was about 10 degrees below zero. But this was also the most desperate time for Li Tianlan since he set off. Li Tianlan gradually woke up from his coma. He didn't know how long he had been in a coma. The strange pain and itch in his limbs still existed, but it had faded a lot. He felt hunger. The hunger of near death gnawed at his nerves. The golden retriever was lying next to him, and it seemed to be on the verge of death. Li Tianlan felt weak all over, which was even more tragic and weak than when his foundation was completely destroyed. He struggled to get up, dragged the golden retriever to a place sheltered from the wind, and then almost killed a polar reindeer nearby. When he dragged the reindeer back, the golden retriever had some spirit, but it still looked sick. Li Tianlan, who was about to collapse, pointed to his prey. He really had no strength to make a fire. The man and the dog barely dealt with the reindeer's body and directly ate the raw meat. The raw meat and blood, with the unique coldness of the polar region, were swallowed by him. Li Tianlan's eyes were calm, but his sight was already spinning. He seemed to have been hungry for a long time. Piece after piece of bloody venison was eaten by him. Taste? Indescribable taste. He only knew to replenish the energy for survival. In a trance, the pain and itch in his limbs seemed to fade as he ate. Li Tianlan ate more and more. The man and the dog almost ate up the whole reindeer. Li Tianlan fainted again. The moonlight on the horizon gradually disappeared. The sun rose and never set again. The polar region began to enter the polar day. There was sunshine over the Arctic Ocean day and night. The sun was bright and cold. Li Tianlan, who woke up again, began to be in a daze again. The feeling of weakness in his body had completely disappeared. The changes that were enough to kill people in just a few days began to fade away. Li Tianlan finally understood that it was not illness. It was an unimaginable wealth. Or a treasure. Under the sun, a smile gradually appeared in his calm eyes. The smile overflowed from his eyes, spread at the corners of his mouth and became more and more obvious. He laughed out loud. The clear laughter kept echoing in the ice glacier. Li Tianlan's eyes seemed to contain amazing divine light. Until this moment he really saw his own path. The path that could lead him all the way to the end of martial arts. He was not moving forward. On the glacier where he lived, he smashed the thick ice with his bare hands and dug a simple house that was not big but big enough for him and the golden retriever to take shelter from the wind. The house was full of prey. Polar reindeer. Polar bear. Polar wolf. There were also some special fish in the sea. Li Tianlan became more and more peaceful. It was just that when he did these things, his eyes would always flash with a strange and bright light. The polar day gradually passed. Another spring festival was coming. The polar region, where the temperature dropped to the freezing point again, ushered in a snowstorm. For the first time, Li Tianlan's palm held divine punishment on his back. Divine punishment was still scarlet as yesterday. The long sword was slightly wide and straight. However, compared to the past, it seemed to lack a lot of the heavy and sharp feeling. Divine punishment was very light. As light as a feather. Li Tianlan still did not draw the sword. In the boundless darkness of the polar night, the snowstorm was howling fiercely. Li Tianlan walked into the snowstorm and began to wield divine punishment with its scabbard. The golden retriever was gnawing the roasted meat in the house that Li Tianlong dug, whimpering happily. Li Tianlong was waving the sword. His movements were slow. It looked clumsy. The scarlet sword with its scabbard cut through the fierce snowstorm with a dull whine. Li Tianlong did not use his strength, but explored the sword intent that had long been engraved in his bones with the smallest effort. That was the 24 moves of sword. The first blade, Wuji. The second blade, Vlingxi. The third blade, Annihilation. The fourth blade, Violent Thunder. The fifth blade, Flying Snow. The sixth blade, until the 23rd blade. There was only half a move in the 24 moves of sword. Li Tianlong simply skipped that half move and started from the first blade again, repeating the cycle. His movements became lighter and lighter, as if he was waving divine punishment in his hand at will. But the sword intent in the snowstorm gradually became clear. One after another, the sword intents merged perfectly in the snowstorm. Li Tianlong's movements began to speed up. The first blade was still the first blade, but it seemed to have become something else. All the sword intent began to change. The perfect circulation of sword intent was torn into pieces by Li Tianlong and was in a mess. All the sword intent finally shattered and disappeared. Only the snowstorm was still howling as if mocking something. Li Tianlong calmly withdrew the sword. Meditation, rest, and waving the sword. The darkness in the polar sun was unchanged. The spring festival had passed. Li Tianlong's sword intent became more and more chaotic. The first blade was not like the first blade, and the absolute sword was not the absolute sword. It was so chaotic that it was even ridiculous. But Li Tianlong was not discouraged. He saw the road that only belonged to him. It was so clear that there was no reason to give up. What was the invincible realm? That was the extreme sublimation of the 4 realms of martial arts. Every invincible realm expert had his own martial arts philosophy. They might be superior to others in the same realm, but in their own philosophy, they were definitely the strongest. That was the invincible realm in the traditional sense. It was the invincible realm, not the invincible realm. Any inheritance station was the path that the ancestors had walked. Looking down from the perspective of the invincible realm, the inheritance was the starting point. Different inheritances meant different levels of starting points. There were too many amazing geniuses and successors of top inheritances, but they were stuck in the half-step invincible realm. Because to move up in this realm, what was needed was one's own faith and the tempering of martial arts. That was the process of abandoning the inheritance to pursue the true self. One step further and the world would be wide open. One step back and disappear into the crowd. Or even beyond redemption. After the thunder-shocking realm, any genius who aspired to the invincible realm would choose to temper his martial arts. And the 4 realms of martial arts were the most direct ladder for them to seek the true self. Chi controlling, ice condensing, fire flaming, thunder shocking. In order to find their own martial arts, they would keep trying and tempering. This process might last 5 years, 10 years, or even a lifetime. The Wang family of Beihai had the inheritance of Sword of 6 Paths of Reincarnation. The Li family had the inheritance of Map of God of War. But every invincible realm expert from these 2 forces was unique. Wang Tianzong's Sword of 6 Paths of Reincarnation would definitely be different from that of the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai. Li Honghe and Li Guangtu's 24 moves of sword would also be different. Li Tianlong was also tempering his martial arts now. But he no longer needed the so-called 4 realms of martial arts. He didn't temper his own realm but his sword. His own sword. In the polar night of the polar region. His sword intent was getting more and more chaotic. The time for him to swing his sword was getting less and less. The polar night was still enveloping the sky. Li Tianlong was still swinging his sword. The chaotic sword intent was constantly entangled in the cold polar region. Li Tianlong was getting calmer and calmer. His sword intent was still chaotic, but the sword intent it carried was getting less and less. The sword intent began to disappear bit by bit as he swung his sword. When Li Tianlong swung his sword again, there was no sword intent in the polar region. Wherever the long sword passed, there was nothing. Li Tianlong himself was stunned. He put away divine punishment, sat on the glacier and looked up at the night. The golden retriever came to him and rubbed his arm. "We should go." Li Tianlong touched the golden retriever's head and whispered. There was no longer any scenery worthy of his nostalgia. Because there was no sword intent here. On this day the polar region was still dark. On this day, it was the second day of February in the Zhongzhou state calendar. The dragon raised its head. Li Tianlan looked down at divine punishment in his hand. He held the hilt with his palm. The whole divine punishment began to shake violently. Li Tianlan's eyes were as calm as water. He pulled out the famous sword of the Lin clan little by little. "Thank you," he said softly. There was no sword intent in divine punishment. The sword intent accumulated for hundreds of years had completely disappeared. The blade was completely out of the sheath. The cold wind blew over. Crack. Divine punishment, which had existed for hundreds of years, shook. With the cold wind, dense cracks appeared on the scarlet and heavy long sword. Li Tianlan loosened his hand. Divine punishment fell down. Before it landed, it began to disintegrate in the cold wind. The metal fragments fluttered in the air as if they were weightless. In front of Li Tianlan's eyes, they became invisible dust in the wind. There was no more divine punishment in the world. Li Tianlan stood up. In the night wind, the invisible sword intent surged under the night sky like mountains and seas. The whole glacier began to shake wildly. Li Tianlan carried the golden retriever on his back. A bright white dress directly broke through the shaking polar night and went straight into the sky. The glacier below was silently cut open and the thick ice fell into the sea. The invisible sword intent poured directly into the sea from the sky. In the huge waves, the polar night in the polar region lit up. Chapter 288. Li Tianlan boarded a cargo ship heading directly from the polar region to Zhongzhou state. This wasn't too difficult of a task. From Zhongzhou state to snow country to the polar ground. Li Tianlan didn't have a passport, so he was a stowaway. But the return trip was very simple. He didn't have a passport, but he had the highest badge of Sai City. The polar region was rich in resources. Whether it was the South Pole or the North Pole, the major forces would more or less establish strongholds. So did Sai City. His badge was enough for the people of Sai City in the polar region to arrange a return route for him as soon as possible. It was easy and discreet enough. The land and sea were calm. The freighter gradually moved away from the Arctic Ocean. The glaciers and coldness were fading away, and the climate began to warm up. Li Tianlan and the golden retriever, who had long been accustomed to the cold, were not used to it. From the polar region back to Zhongzhou state, they took the northeast sea route, starting from the Arctic Ocean, passing through the Pacific Ocean and finally entering the Yellow Sea, arriving at Qingdao in Dongshan province of Zhongzhou state. In 1 month they had traveled more than 6,000 kilometers. The tenacious golden retriever began to jump around after the first few days. After living in the snow country in the extreme low for nearly 3 years, it was not easy to survive. Now that they were finally in a normal environment, the golden retriever immediately felt like a husky. Li Tianlan spent most of his time on the ship in a daze. He didn't get seasick, but he didn't really like the environment around him except for seawater. What he missed was this feeling. The ship sailed on the sea. Behind him was the glacier and in front of him was the golden age. Behind him was freedom and in front of him were fetters. Most of the time he would stand on the deck and look at the way he came. The cargo ship sailed forward. The stern of the ship drew a clear white wave. There were no glaciers in sight and the weather was no longer cold. Li Tianlan was finally sure that the so-called freedom was really far away from him. All the worries, conspiracies, swords, deceptions and turbulent times in the bustling city were getting closer and closer to him. He began to miss the quietness on the glacier. He knew very well that if there were no accidents in this life, the past few years would be the only relaxing time in his life. That year, Li Tianlan was 22 years old. He already had the ability to shoulder more responsibilities. Freedom was good, but that was not his life. Li Tianlan looked up at the sky. He shaved off his already long beard and briefly combed his hair, revealing a clean and warm face. The sky was filled with the glow of sunset. The clouds were illuminated by the setting sun into a fiery red color, and the gorgeous light and shadow were projected on the endless sea. Under the setting sun there was no wind or waves. It was a beautiful scene. He suddenly remembered a saying. When I first met the world when I was a teenager, Li Tianlan laughed. Under the sky and in the setting sun when he was 22 years old, his laughter was ignorant and nostalgic. The golden retriever circled around him. Li Tianlan opened his hands. The big dog pounced on him. Li Tianlan gently stroked the soft fur of the golden retriever and looked at the deep sea with a calm face. There was no sword in his hand. But his arms exuded a power that seemed to be able to overturn the entire sea. Li Tianlan began to recall. He thought of the Li family, the remaining uncles of the Li family, the East Emperor Palace, Li Baiyan and Ning Qianqing, the Samsara Palace, Sai City, Tribulation Institute Songyue, the Dongqing clan, Dongqing Wudi and Bai Qingqian. Something seemed to have been forgotten. Li Tianlan knew that he hadn't forgotten. He just kept silent and didn't want to think about it. He also thought of the divine punishment that was broken into pieces and blown into dust by the wind in the polar region. Li Tianlan's eyes were surrounded by sword light. There was no sword in his hand. At this moment, Li Tianlan knew where he should go. The human emperor was broken in heaven capital. Divine punishment was broken in the polar region. He needed a new weapon, a powerful one. In May, the Pacific Ocean was cool and hot. Li Tianlan's mind had completely flown back to Zhou State. Because of the final battle in Heaven Capital, the official opening time of the Sky Academy and the Deep Sea Academy was delayed for several months, from early spring to early autumn. This year was the third year. It was also the graduation year of the Sky Academy. If the official opening time began in early autumn, then the last maneuver of the two academies should be from the end of June to the beginning of July. Li Tianlan was just in time for this maneuver. That would be the starting point of the East Emperor Palace. In the future, whether the East Emperor Palace would be completely integrated into the system or become a free force, the final maneuver of the two academies would be a threshold that could not be bypassed. After that, Li Tianlan would face the great pressure brought to him by Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai in Zhou State. He just didn't know how his grandfather was. The old master's physical condition directly determined whether Li Tianlan would face a narrow escape or a certain death in Zhou State. He touched the palm of the golden retriever subconsciously a little harder. The golden retriever whimpered and shook its head hard in Li Tianlan's arms. Li Tianlan was shocked and subconsciously let go. The golden retriever looked at him innocently and seemed to be a little wronged. "I'm sorry." Li Tianlan smiled apologetically. "I'll ask Senior Yu to cook a delicious meal for you when we go back. He used to be the chef of the Hidden Dragon Sea. I'll let you enjoy the treatment of the giants of Zhou State." The golden retriever wanted to rub against him again. Li Tianlan pressed it down casually. Looking at the setting sun in the sky, he stood up from the deck and said, "Let's go back." He had a separate room on the ship. Sai City arranged everything very well. The captain, who seemed to have a clean background, seemed to be one of them. They specially prepared cigarettes and a small amount of wine for him. 3 meals a day were also specially sent to him. It was standard VIP treatment. Li Tianlan was not dissatisfied with it. But after drifting on the sea for a long time, his desire to return to Zhou State began to become more and more urgent. The cargo ship became quieter at night. The golden retriever lay on Li Tianlan's bed. Li Tianlan sat at the head of the bed and meditated. His meditation now was closer to thinking. Because his will was already perfect, under the situation of absolute focus, his path became increasingly clear. 3 years. In the cold wind and snow all over the sky, Li Tianlan couldn't tell how much he had gotten, but he knew he had gotten a lot. The most perfect embryonic form of martial arts, the most intangible sword intent and the strongest body. The 3 years after the great breakthrough were not wasted. Instead, everything became absolutely perfect. Li Tianlan began to fade the traces of the 24 moves of sword in his mind. He was exploring his own martial Dao and also his own sword intent. He had come to this point on his road and he no longer wanted the different 24 moves of sword. Just like what he said to Institute Songyue on the top of Mount Taibai 3 years ago. No matter how different it was, the 24 moves of sword was still the 24 moves of sword. What he wanted was his own sword intent. The martial arts that belonged only to him. The night gradually passed. The starry sky on the sea, which was far more brilliant than on land, disappeared quietly when the morning light came. There was light outside, but the sky was gloomy. Li Tianlan woke up from meditation and encountered the first storm since he boarded the ship. The sky on the rain. The sea under the rain. In the raging wind, the sky and the sea were shaking at the same time. Dark clouds covered the sky, and the surface of the sea during the day seemed to have entered the polar night. The endless sea under the dark clouds looked desperate black. The heavy rain drifted down and huge waves rushed to the deck with the wind. The cargo ship, which was not small, was shaking in the wind and rain. Thunder sounded one after another. The golden retriever was no longer by Li Tianlan's side. Instead it went to the corner of the room. Li Tianlan stood steadily on the deck, looking at the boiling and extremely fierce deep sea. His eyes were shining and his whole body was surrounded by the illusory but domineering sword intent. The rain was crushed around him. Li Tianlan stood there without feeling anything, quietly looking at the irresistible deep sea that seemed to be in a rage. The storm came and went quickly. The dark clouds were blown away by the wind. The rain was still. The warm sunshine soon shone on the sea again, and there was a sparkling light in sight. Li Tianlan, whose clothes were still dry and fresh, looked into the distance. There was a brilliance in the distant sky. A colorful rainbow bridge across the sea suddenly appeared on the calm sea. The color was so clear. It was far away but it seemed to be within reach. Li Tianlan was in a trance. He looked deeply into the distance. The rainbow seemed to be getting closer. There was an island floating in the air. The islands appeared in the air in pieces, becoming clearer and clearer, like a continent floating in the air. The continuous islands floated between the rainbows. Antique palaces, flowers and jungles covering the archipelago, people on the islands, everything appeared clearly in his sight. There seemed to be a layer of mist separating the islands from the deep sea, making everything look far away and close. The rainbow was dazzling. The islands became clearer and clearer. In the rainbow, it was the rarest mirage of the sea after the rain. Li Tianlan was completely fascinated. An exquisite figure appeared clearly in his line of sight. She stood above the tallest palace on the island, seeming to overlook the deep sea or the horizon. The sea breeze blew her hair. She wore a red dress and her long hair and skirt fluttered at the same time. Li Tianlan seemed to have smelled the delicate fragrance that haunted his dreams but dared not think about. He looked at her quietly, his eyes unblinking. You are the moonlight pouring down at night. You are the clouds floating in the sky. You are the most touching fragrance in the world. That was Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai was in the rainbow in the mirage. Such a perfect and unparalleled Qin Weibai. The indifference, stubbornness and persistence in Li Tianlan's heart completely disappeared in an instant. He thought about the reunion between them in the future. But he never thought that it would be such a reunion. They were thousands of miles apart between the sky and the sea. The light refracted a large area of the island in Qin Weibai. The cruelest and the most gentle. Li Tianlan's figure subconsciously rushed out of the deck and rose high into the sky. The sword intent that was completely out of control was boiling in the sea. A huge wave as high as 100 meters suddenly rose in front of the freighter. The sword intent was swirling in the sea. The huge wave was getting higher and higher. In the sea, a mountain seemed to rise in front of the freighter. Li Tianlan stood on the huge wave and kept rising. He looked at Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai couldn't see him. Such a reunion. The huge wave was still rising. The mirage was getting farther and farther away. Standing between the rainbows, she was also getting more and more illusory. This was the distance. Between him and her, even if it could topple mountains and overturn seas, it couldn't reach. Chapter 289. Li Tianlan still didn't know where Qin Weibai was. He wasn't even sure if what the mirage reflected in front of him was the real scene and how far it was from him. The illusory mirage began to disappear. The cloud-like figure gradually dimmed. Li Tianlan returned to the deck. He watched everything disappear in front of him, but there was nothing he could do. The sky cleared up after the rain. The rainbow in the sky became clearer. All the sailors and the captain of the cargo ship respected Li Tianlan like a god. It was no secret that there were 4 realms of martial arts and absolute masters in the world. But how many people had seen a force that was close to the power of heaven to set off a 1,000-meter-high wave in the vast deep sea with his own power? Under everyone's careful service, the cargo ship gradually sailed out of the Pacific Ocean and into the Yellow Sea. In the following days, Li Tianlan never left the deck. He kept looking at the direction where the mirage disappeared. But the sea was no longer gloomy and there was no heavy rain. Naturally, there was no mirage that he had been longing for. In the middle of June, the cargo ship entered Dongshan province of Zhou state. It docked at Qingdao in the evening. The sound of water faded away. Li Tianlan walked out of the dock with golden retriever. The hustle and bustle of Zhou state came to him in an instant. The wind and snow in the polar region were dissipating. The mirage was dissolving. The sword intent began to fall silent. Li Tianlan's eyes were in a trance. He looked at Zhou State, which he had left for 3 years, as if a lifetime had passed. "It's good that you're back." A voice suddenly sounded in front of Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan came to his senses. Without a sound, a figure in black had already appeared in front of him. Black casual clothes, black casual pants, casual leather shoes, short hair, and a pale but slightly delicate face. Li Tianlan's mouth twitched and he said, "Martial uncle, you're really becoming more and more modern." Tribulation's appearance was far younger than his actual age. He looked like a young man less than 30 years old. Now his outfit made him look a few years younger. Li Tianlan remembered the black robe and silver mask when he first met Tribulation. The unparalleled shadow formula, the forceful and domineering stop formula, and the sharp and cold kill formula. At that time, Tribulation was a mysterious and powerful death hidden under the black robe and silver mask. But now, although it was not the first time he had seen such a tribulation, he still couldn't accept it. Sai City no longer needs to hide behind snow mountains and masks. Tribulation's tone was indifferent. "It's meaningless." Li Tianlan fell silent. Sai City had always stood aloof from worldly affairs. Every top assassin wore a mask and rarely competed with other forces in the country for any resources. They just lived quietly on the snow-covered mountain top under the mask. But as he became the young governor of Sai City, everything would change completely. Tribulation coughed softly and wiped the corner of his mouth with his fingers calmly. Li Tianlan vaguely saw a trace of red. His heart suddenly sank. Looking at Tribulation's pale face, he asked, "The jade seal is useless?" "It works." Tribulation glanced at him, waved his hand and said, "Let's talk in the car." From Sai City to Zither Island, Tribulation came to pick up Li Tianlan alone, without even bringing a driver. Li Tianlan put the golden retriever in the back seat and sat in the passenger seat. Looking at Tribulation's pale face, he asked in a deep voice, "Martial uncle, what's going on?" Tribulation went straight into the invincible realm in Heaven Capital. It had been 3 years now. He couldn't imagine how serious the injury was that Tribulation hadn't fully recovered in 3 years under the influence of the Imperial Jade Seal's massive luck. "I'm much better than before you left." Tribulation drove away from the dock and said calmly, "But the injury was so severe that the luck in the Jade Seal could only slowly neutralize my injury. Unless I can make a big breakthrough and start over like you, I can only endure it." He paused and laughed at himself. "At my age, how can I have the qualification to start over?" Li Tianlan looked at Tribulation seriously. Tribulation was the strongest assassin in the Dark World. Now that his injury had recovered a little and his breath was restrained, Li Tianlan couldn't see any clue. "So now?" he asked softly. "Invincible realm." There was no expression on Tribulation's face. "It's almost the same as before the breakthrough. I'm injured and can only exert about half of my strength, but I should not be worse than Gu Qianchuan." Gu Qianchuan was the first elder of Kunlun City and was not worse than him. Sounded good, but he was the most amazing assassin in the Dark World. It was not bad that he had recovered to this extent, but it was definitely not good news. "What about you?" Tribulation handed Li Tianlan a cigarette and suddenly asked, "In 3 years, how is the recovery from Huiting to the polar region, which is tens of thousands of miles?" Li Tianlan took the cigarette and lit it. He took a deep breath, feeling the long-lost taste of tobacco and the dizziness in his brain. He thought about it carefully and said softly, "Still outside the invincible realm." His martial arts had no 4 realms of martial arts, only sword intent. Sword intent was not invincible, which meant he was outside the invincible realm. Without a life-and-death fight, Li Tianlan didn't know what his current combat strength was. Tribulation took a deep look at him and said softly, "Let's go back first." Li Tianlan hesitated for 2 or 3 seconds and finally shook his head. He whispered, "Martial uncle, I won't go to Mount Taibai." Tribulation subconsciously slowed down the car. He went to see Li Tianlan. As a result, the golden retriever in the back row rushed over and blocked Li Tianlan's expression with a huge dog head. "Why?" Tribulation asked. Li Tianlan didn't speak. It was not that he didn't like Mount Taibai, but Situ Tsongyue gave him a very complicated feeling. The hidden god of Zhou State did not have any malice. But in Li Tianlan's feeling, the other party's kindness did not seem to be for him or even for the Li family. 3 years ago he saw Situ Tsongyue on Mount Taibai. Situ Tsongyue looked at him as if she was looking at another person. Li Tianlong knew who she was looking at. But he didn't like this feeling and didn't know how to face that kind of gaze. My sister has been collecting news about Snow Country and the polar region in recent years. Although she didn't say it, she secretly went to Snow Country once, but she didn't find you. There are not many people in Sai City, but you haven't met all of them. Everyone wants to see how the young governor is after the great victory. Secretary Bai went to Mount Taibai almost every month to ask about you in recent years. She cried every time. She was very sad. I never knew that the strong woman in politics could be so fragile. Li Tianlong knew that Tribulation was talking about Bai Qingqian, Dongqing Wudi's wife. Li Tianlong had never thought of her for 3 years. They only met once and didn't talk much. He thought he should have forgotten her long ago. But now when he heard Tribulation mention her again, Li Tianlong had a feeling that he couldn't breathe. That feeling was not oppressive but strange. Go to Luojing Zhongyun. Li Tianlong interrupted Tribulation and said in a low voice. Tribulation said no more and drove in another direction in silence. At the same time he changed the topic and said, Dongqing Wudi has been promoted. In the years you were away, the relationship between the academics and the giant group was not affected. He went to Yuzhou last year. The army headquarters? Li Tianlong raised his eyebrows. The Border Control Corps had a saying in Zhongzhou State that the Border Control Corps was a small army headquarters. The commander of the Border Control Corps went to the capital and competed for the position of the army headquarters. If he went to any other place, it could be said that he was promoted in public but demoted in private. Tribulation said, he took over Qi Baitsong's position. Qi Baitsong retired last year. Li Tianlong said, he knew Qi Baitsong, the flag figure of the Special Warfare Group. In the past few years he had been the backbone to check and balance President Li Huaqing's military power. He retired so smoothly that Dongqing Wudi became the nominal number 2 in the military of Zhongzhou State, but actually the number 1 in the military. This was somewhat unexpected. As Dongqing Wudi changed from a member of the decision-making committee to a director and became a real giant, the giant group's right to speak in Zhongzhou State would be greatly enhanced. In this matter, the Wang family of Beihai also contributed. The Dongqing clan never made a losing deal. In the border war 3 years ago, the Border Control Corps penetrated 800 miles into the territory of Annan State. That land, together with the elites of the Border Control Corps, was handed over by the Dongqing clan to the Wang family of Beihai in exchange for the support of the Wang family of Beihai to Dongqing Wudi. Now the situation in Zhongzhou State is a bit chaotic. You came back at the right time. Li Tianlong silently thought about the impact of the change at the top level on him and suddenly said, who will take over the Border Control Corps? For the time being, Dongqing Wudi is the commander of the army. The position is a bit difficult to produce. As for who will be in charge, it depends on the next transaction of the major groups. Tribulation's tone was indifferent. But his words were enough to make Li Tianlong realize the great changes that had happened and were about to happen in Zhongzhou State. He narrowed his eyes and said no more. It was night when they got off the boat from Qin Island. When they arrived at Luojing, it was close to midnight. Although Tribulation had informed the Dongqing clan in advance, when the car drove to the mountain occupied by the Dongqing clan, Tribulation and Li Tianlong couldn't help but be a little surprised. Before going up the mountain road, Dongqing Hongguang, the old patriarch of the Dongqing clan, was standing there with his butler, motionless. No one knew how long they had been waiting. Tribulation was surprised. Li Tianlong felt ridiculous and even a little scared. He didn't think he was qualified to let the spiritual leader of the giant group wait for him at the foot of the mountain overnight. Old master. Li Tianlong quickly got out of the car and held Dongqing Hongguang's hand with both hands. The Dongqing clan really couldn't find any fault with him. Li Tianlong was moved and had nothing to say for a while. Son, it's good that you're back. Wudi was going to come back, but there was a temporary meeting. When he came, it would be dawn. Dongqing Hongguang smiled and patted Li Tianlong's palm. His eyes were a little tired but full of kindness. Rushi is already on the way. You came faster than I thought. Thank you. Li Tianlong looked at Dongqing Hongguang and said in a dry voice. Thank you. Don't say it too early. Dongqing Hongguang smiled and said, there is a bigger surprise to come. He looked at Tribulation standing beside Li Tianlong and said with a smile, Your Highness, you've worked hard. Tribulation shook his head. He was in the invincible realm, but in front of Li Tianlan he was only willing to be a deputy governor standing beside the young governor. Old master, do you mean that the thing that the Dongqing clan has been researching in recent years has been successful? Tribulation asked. Dongqing Hongguang laughed and said, 2 months ago it was successfully completed. Tianlan, you came back just in time. 3 years ago, Senior Li sent the murderous weapon, the Legend of Qin, and you asked Wu Di to send the fragments of the Li family's murderous weapon. Today I give you a real murderous weapon. It may not be the strongest, but it's definitely the most suitable for you. Li Tianlan's eyes lit up. A new weapon. This was the main purpose of his coming to Zhongyun. Where is it? He asked subconsciously. Not here. Dongqing Hongguang smiled and said, in the secret laboratory in Spirit Treasure City. I'll take you there now. But Tianlan, the person who used the Legend of Qin to create a new murderous weapon, is my nephew. His lifelong wish is to create a real murderous weapon. The previous Mad Strike and Sky Attack were made by him, but they were far less powerful than the murderous weapon. Until he saw the Legend of Qin this time, he simply devoted all his attention to it. In 3 years he was too ashamed to say that he created a new murderous weapon, but now the one in Spirit Treasure City has indeed replaced the Legend of Qin, so... He hesitated and said, he wants to name your weapon. It was definitely an honor in the Dark World to name a murderous weapon that could be handed down for hundreds of thousands of years. No problem. It's a small matter. Li Tianlan answered without hesitation. He didn't care about the name of the weapon at all. The human emperor of divine punishment sounded domineering, but in fact he didn't mind even if it was called grass or wildflower. If it's a small matter, Lan, how about you promise me something big? Dongqing Hongguang glanced at Li Tianlan and said with a chuckle. Li Tianlan's heart sank. Thinking of the engagement, he coughed and said, what do you want me to promise? It's not what you're worried about. Dongqing Hongguang laughed and scolded. He did want to mention it, but after hearing Li Tianlan's words he simply changed the topic and said, I couldn't find you in the past few years. Now that you're here, how about you come back this Mid-Autumn Festival and spend the Mid-Autumn Festival together? The Mid-Autumn Festival was the day of reunion. The old man had been longing for the real reunion for many years. Li Tianlan hesitated a little and then shook his head. Dongqing Hongguang's eyes were dim and puzzled. If Li Tianlan didn't come back, then Bai Qingqian, who hadn't come back for many years, wouldn't come back either. How could they reunite? Why? Dongqing Hongguang asked softly. Old master. Li Tianlan gave a wry smile and shook his head, saying, the Mid-Autumn Festival and New Year's Eve have nothing to do with me since I was born. In the place where I live, the Li family doesn't celebrate the Mid-Autumn Festival. The Mid-Autumn Festival, New Year's Eve, and the Lantern Festival, these traditional festivals had nothing to do with the Li family as long as Li Tianlan could remember. For ordinary people it might be very festive. But for the Li family such festivals were only painful. So the Li family never celebrated the Mid-Autumn Festival. It was just New Year's Eve. Chapter 290. As the leading military tycoon in Zhongzhou State, the Dongqing clan established or indirectly controlled military groups all over Zhongzhou State. But only those who really knew the inside story knew that the essence of the Dongqing clan was their own secret research and laboratories. In the past 2 decades, the Dongqing clan had introduced 5 new technologies, each of which caused a huge sensation. 17 years ago, the intercontinental long-range missile code-named Aurora had been developed to the 3rd generation, and it was still the main missile of Zhongzhou State. 14 years ago, the Black Dragon Army, a subordinate of the Border Praetorian Corps, was equipped with the Great Wall defense system of the Dongqing clan. It was upgraded a few times and was still working perfectly. 12 years ago, the individual combat weapon Mad Strike that could be mass-produced came out. 8 years ago, after careful consideration, Zhongzhou State finally gave a small number of precious materials to the Dongqing clan at a great cost. In less than 3 years, the Dongqing clan proved its top-notch technology in the field of individual combat armor. In 3 years, the military allocated funds 6 times, and the Dongqing clan made a total of 4 armors. They were Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and Black Tortoise. 4 Spirits armor, which was now famous throughout the Dark World. 5 years ago, the Dongqing clan began to develop an upgraded version of Mad Strike. So in the Battle of Heaven Capital 3 years ago, Li Tianlan got the first finished product developed by the Dongqing clan. A gun that could threaten a thunder-shocking realm expert. The most important thing was mass production. It was a magical word. This was the Dongqing clan. A clan that flashed with wisdom and technology in the bloody slaughter. It was powerful, huge, deep-rooted, and full of talents. Few people knew where the most essential and hidden weapon laboratory of the Dongqing clan was. Most people could only guess that it was in Zhongzhou, but they didn't even know the general direction. But Dongqing Hongguang really trusted Li Tianlan 100%. On the way to Spirit Treasure City, even Tribulation was lucky enough to go with him. How important was the laboratory that could experiment and successfully transform murderous weapons? Even on the way, Li Tianlan could clearly feel the weight behind Dongqing Hongguang's trust. The vehicle was driving on the highway in the night. Dongqing Hongguang, who was sitting with Li Tianlan, patted Li Tianlan's palm and whispered, "Our laboratory in Spirit Treasure City is the metal laboratory, which is also the one hidden deep. The murderous weapons material is special, so it needs to be activated there. My nephew, you should call him uncle, got a lot of inspiration in the process of transforming murderous weapons. Now he is over there studying the new generation of alloy technology in Zhongzhou State. I don't know much about it, but it is said that if there is a breakthrough in that technology, the defense of the active armored tanks in Zhongzhou State will be doubled. Today you guys should get to know each other. In the future, if you need any weapons, you can look for Wudi to get the approval and then get Wujin to make them for you. We're family, so don't stand on ceremony." Li Tianlan nodded, not knowing what to say. "Your Highness, if Sai City needs anything, the Dongqing clan is willing to do our best." Dongqing Hongguang looked at Tribulation, who was sitting in the passenger seat, and said slowly, "Thank you." Tribulation nodded, but he sighed in his heart. This was probably old Master Dongqing's love for Li Tianlan. The distance between Luojing and Spirit Treasure was not far. Uncle and the butler of the Dongqing clan drove the car. After entering Spirit Treasure City, they continued to move forward, went out of Hanggu Pass and finally stopped in a manor less than 2 kilometers away from Hanggu Pass. Li Tianlan, who felt a little uncomfortable, was the first to get out of the car. There was a breeze blowing in the field. Li Tianlan, who had sweat on his body, felt clear-headed. He turned his eyes to the manor. At the gate of the manor, a red sports car was parked there. A tall and slim girl stood by the car and looked at Li Tianlan quietly. Li Tianlan froze for a moment and opened his mouth. He didn't expect to see Dongqing Rushi at first sight after getting out of the car. Dongqing Rushi, who seemed to have been waiting here for a while, walked over gently. The early summer night was a little cool. Dongqing Rushi was dressed more casually. A white off-the-shoulder short-sleeved t-shirt. He wore a pair of blue denim shorts. The shorts were very short. A pair of snow-white, slender and long legs were exposed. The dark-colored stilettos made a crisp sound as they clicked on the ground. Dongqing Rushi walked up to Li Tianlan and looked into his eyes seriously. Her body was very fragrant, a clear and gentle fragrance with a kind of soft taste. Li Tianlan's eyes fell from her face to her snow-white shoulders, and then to her slender and straight legs. The night wind blew up Dongqing Rushi's hair. Her eyes were clear and quiet. She was his fiancée. An idea suddenly came to Li Tianlan's mind. After 3 years, Dongqing Rushi was still beautiful, but there was a hint of fashionable arrogance in her. Li Tianlan was a little dazzled. He coughed and pointed to the gate of the manor as naturally as possible. "Why don't you go in?" "I don't have the authority." Dongqing Rushi blinked and looked at Li Tianlan's face seriously. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Li Tianlan nodded. They were not familiar with each other before. They hadn't seen each other for 3 years and now it was really awkward. He touched his nose and braced himself to talk awkwardly. Dongqing Rushi had already opened her arms. "Hug me." Her voice was soft and she looked at Li Tianlan with a little caution. Li Tianlan had a headache. In his sight he saw Uncle and the butler of the Dongqing clan, walking to the gate of the manor. Tribulation and Dongqing Hongguang, who had gotten out of the car, stood together. Tribulation was looking at the scenery in the night. Dongqing Hongguang's eyes had already turned over. Li Tianlan saw that the old man was looking at him and Dongqing Rushi. His eyes were full of expectation. This kind of emotion was so strong that it even seemed to be a little pleading. Li Tianlan's heart suddenly twitched. At this moment he really realized that in this engagement he had reached the point of no retreat. Dongqing Rushi opened her hands in front of him, and her eyes were so careful. Li Tianlan took a step forward and held Dongqing Rushi in his arms. It was very light, very soft, very fragrant. Dongqing Rushi put her arms around Li Tianlan's waist. Her little face gently rubbed Li Tianlan's chin and she whispered, "I missed you so much." Li Tianlan had a complicated feeling in his heart. From an angle that he couldn't see, Dongqing Rushi's eyes were also complicated and confused. It had been 3 years. She didn't know whether she missed Li Tianlan or not, just like she opened her hands in front of Li Tianlan, but she wasn't sure if she really wanted him to hug her. She only knew that if she did this, Grandpa would be very happy and so would her father and mother. That was enough. Nothing else mattered at all. She didn't think there was anything unacceptable about Li Tianlan. Not at all. Because she had received too much since she was a child. Music, dance, poetry, painting, calligraphy, massage, embroidery, cooking she had been learning since she was a child. Because this was something that Li Tianlan might like. Martial arts, finance, politics, power play, psychology, interpersonal relations, she had also been learning since she was a child. Because this was something that could help Li Tianlan. She had known Li Tianlan's existence since she was a child. From the time she could remember, countless people had told her that her future husband was Li Tianlan. This name was like an instinctive curse that had long been deeply engraved in her bones. Even many times Dongqing Rushi felt that she was not Dongqing Rushi. In this world her only identity seemed to be Li Tianlan's fiancé. It really didn't matter whether she liked him or not. She had to stand with him. Only in this way could Dongqing Rushi feel the meaning of her existence. Uncle An's figure was stopped at the gate of the manor. Several middle-aged men who looked very ordinary appeared at the gate with extremely restrained aura. Uncle An did the registration meticulously and keyed in 3 passwords on the door before the door slowly opened to both sides. A middle-aged man who looked a little dull and old-fashioned seemed to have gotten the news and quickly walked out of the gate. He was the first to walk to Dongqing Hongguang. This seemed to be a middle-aged man who rarely showed his expression. Looking at Dongqing Hongguang, he forced an uncomfortable smile on his stiff face. He bowed meticulously and said, "Uncle." Dongqing Hongguang nodded and pointed to Tribulation beside him. "This is His Highness Situ Wanjia of Sai City." The middle-aged man acted as if he had never heard of this name. He made 2 random sounds and turned to look at Li Tianlan and Dongqing Rushi who were hugging each other. He walked over quickly. The footsteps awakened Dongqing Rushi who was a little confused. She straightened up from Li Tianlan's arms and looked at the middle-aged man coming over. She said in a clear voice, "This is Uncle." Before Li Tianlan could react, the middle-aged man had introduced himself. "I'm Dongqing Wujin." Dongqing Wujin didn't know many people in the Dark World. But many people in the Dark World knew him. He was the honorary dean of the Academy of Military Sciences of Zhou State, a senior academician, a doctor of metallography, precision mechanics and physics. He was one of the pioneers in the field of weapon research in Zhou State and the soul of all the secret weapon laboratories of the Dongqing clan. Dongqing Wujin's figure was thin. Standing in front of Li Tianlan, he only gave him the feeling that he was not talkative and dull. Li Tianlan couldn't call him uncle. He could only vaguely call him dean. Dongqing Wujin didn't mind. He just said with a dull face, "Your weapon is behind you." He reached out and pointed. Inside the manor, a young man with glasses ran out with a silver suitcase. Everyone stared at the suitcase in his hand. Dongqing Wujin's face was still dull, but his eyes gradually became hot. The silver suitcase was not big, but it contained the highest achievement of his life. The new murderous weapon of the Dark World. Dongqing Wujin took the suitcase. In Li Tianlan's fiery eyes, he entered the complicated password and opened the suitcase. There was one more layer in the suitcase. Enter the password. One more layer. One more layer. One more layer. Li Tianlan's eyes gradually became dull. He looked at Dongqing Wujin, who meticulously carried out his actions, and wondered if this dull uncle was deliberately messing with him. The suitcase was opened layer by layer, getting smaller and smaller. Dongqing Wujin finally took out a square box the size of a palm from the suitcase. "Here you are." Dongqing Wujin handed the small box to Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan took it with a blank face. The box was plain black and unremarkable. He looked at Dongqing Wujin. "Open it." Dongqing Wujin stared at the box in Li Tianlan's hand, breathing fast. Li Tianlan touched the iron box in his hand. There was no password on the iron box, so he directly opened the lid. A weak silver light emitted from the box. The light was overflowing, very gorgeous. Li Tianlan's expression was on the verge of collapse. In the desert he had a firm will comparable to the heavenly king heart. From Huading to the polar ground he walked thousands of miles. In 3 years his will became more focused and his mind became more stable. But at this moment, looking at the things in the box, he still couldn't help but burst into tears. This was the King new murderous weapon. This was the murderous weapon that Dongqing Hongguang said was the most suitable for him? Li Tianlan wondered if the Dongqing clan had any misunderstanding about him. Or was a misunderstanding at all? Or did they take the wrong thing? He looked at the things in the box with a blank face. The silver light in the box flowed softly. It's so beautiful. Dongqing Rushi looked at it in a daze and whispered. She reached out her hand. It seemed that she wanted to touch the things in the box, but she subconsciously withdrew her hand halfway. Li Tianlan's mouth twitched and he finally couldn't help saying, It was a bracelet. The fact was obvious to Li Tianlan. In the box there was a silver bracelet. Or a bracelet. It was a very gorgeous object. The bracelet had almost natural mysterious patterns and the silver light was soft. It was fine even if a man wore it. But the problem was, he didn't come here for the so-called bracelet. The murderous weapon is a metal far beyond the technology of Zhou state. There are many theories about the murderous weapon, such as meteorites from outer space or unknown energy. They all make some sense. But in my opinion it's more like a life, silicon-based life. Dongqing Wujin said eagerly, the murderous weapon is not researched. What we can do now is to activate it because they themselves are powerful weapons. I experimented many times in the process of activating it. This piece of metal emits different wavelengths when it encounters different environments. I can't understand the meaning of those wavelengths for the time being, but I'm more inclined to think that it's their own emotions, but we can't communicate. This metal, I think, is a kind of energy that we can't understand for the time being. The so-called murderous weapon is only a part of its power. If we can thoroughly study the murderous weapon, the energy contained in this piece of metal is even enough to drive an aircraft carrier for a long time. Dongqing Wujin's eyes were burning. He looked at Li Tianlan and then said, but now it seems that it is the most suitable as a murderous weapon in the dark world. How should I use it? Li Tianlan had a headache. Can be stimulated. Dongqing Wujin looked at the bracelet in Li Tianlan's hand and said, it can be stimulated by any energy. The murderous weapon needs time to store energy. I studied the legend of Qin, so I roughly know that any murderous weapon has 2 states. The first is the storage state and the second is the activation state. The activation state is when the murderous weapon is full of energy but before it is launched. At that time it will become the most easy state to vent energy. With its size, it is the most suitable for all kinds of firearms. Because of this, I think they are more like a kind of life. The storage state is their original form. The original form of the legend of Qin is something like a scepter. I used the fragment of the infinite sky to merge with the legend of Qin, and finally turned it into this. Li Tianlan listened carefully. The 12 murderous weapons were extremely mysterious even in the dark world. Very few people knew what secrets they held. Most people only knew that they were irresistibly powerful. If it can store energy one day, I have made a database. The Dongqing clan also has model data of the power of the murderous weapon. Dongqing Wujin said. Li Tianlan's heart skipped a beat. He remembered the battle that made Zhou State's sword Emperor Wang Tianzong famous more than a decade ago. Tens of thousands of meters away, the human emperor directly killed Tianling, an invincible realm expert of night spirit at that time. That battle took place on the border of Zhou State. Dongqing Wudi controlled the border control corps, so he must have a detailed understanding of the power of the human emperor. If the murderous weapon in your hand finishes storing energy, and you are not weaker than Wang Tianzong at that time, the power it can exert should be infinitely close to that of the human emperor. Dongqing Wudi whispered, but after the legend of Qin integrated with the infinite sky, there are some side effects. Its energy storage time will also become very long. I can't calculate the specific time for the time being. Li Tianlan nodded. The human emperor was the most powerful murderous weapon among the 12 murderous weapons. It had the longest range and the longest energy storage time. Now the power of the bracelet in his hand was infinitely close to that of the human emperor, so the energy storage time would naturally be infinitely close. So, he smiled, looked at Dongqing Wujin and asked, So I can only take it with me for the time being? If you don't feel bad about it, you can use it as a cold weapon. Dongqing Wujin's eyes were calm. The murderous weapon can be stimulated by any energy, and after being stimulated, it can also change into any shape. Qi controlling, ice condensing, fire flaming, thunder shocking, these are theoretically energy and they can all stimulate the murderous weapon. Treating the murderous weapon as a cold weapon. No force could be so extravagant. But Li Tianlan had no choice at all. He narrowed his eyes. The four realms of martial arts were theoretically energy. But in theory these energies could also be said to be sword intent. He put the bracelet on his hand and suddenly clenched his fist. The seemingly invisible sword intent in the air suddenly began to madly gather toward his palm. Li Tianlan's figure almost became completely invisible in the sword intent. In an instant the silver bracelet on his wrist began to flow and change. The silver light in Li Tianlan's hand stretched along his sword intent. His sword intent was moving forward and so was the silver light. The bracelet began to disappear. There was a long sword flowing with silver light in Li Tianlan's hand. Once again the sword intent wrapped the long sword and shaped a new outfit for it. The silver light stretched forward. The sword turned into a silver spear. Then it turned into a silver sky halberd. The shape of the murderous weapon in the state of energy storage was completely stimulated or shaped by sword intent. Li Tianlan's eyes lit up. He looked at Dongqing Wujin and solemnly said, "Dean, please give it a name." Falling stars. Dongqing Wujin said without hesitation. His face was no longer dull but extraordinary and sharp. This murderous weapon is called falling stars. Dongqing Hongguang and Tribulation, who were standing nearby, were stunned at the same time. Falling stars. These four words themselves were a kind of memory. The Dongqing clan once had an expert of the invincible realm. That was Dongqing Hongguang's father. Many years ago the invincible realm expert of the Dongqing clan ranked third on the divine list. In the entire dark world, only the patriarchs of the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family ranked ahead of him. That was the most glorious period of Zhongzhou state, and also the most glorious period of the Dongqing clan and Jade Pool. And the most powerful unique skill of that expert was called Falling Stars. The Falling Stars sword should have been the 8th move after the 7 swords of Jade Pool. However, that unique skill was short-lived in the dark world and eventually lost, leaving only its name. Li Tianlan took a deep look at Dongqing Wujin and said, "Thank you." The falling stars in the form of the sky halberd vibrated wildly in his hand. Li Tianlan took a deep breath. His figure suddenly disappeared and the next moment he had gone straight into the sky. The sky halberd was already 3 meters long. Li Tianlan held the murderous weapon and pierced the sky. The night passed and the dawn rose. Outside Hanggu Pass, the silver flowing light swept the field with silent waves like a raging sea. The golden retriever stood on the ground and looked up at the sky, roaring. The silver flowing light exploded high in the sky. The silver light flowed in the sky, like falling stars. Li Tianlan stood high in the sky, dressed in white, and the sky halberd was still flowing with silver light. The night gradually dissipated in the barking of the golden retriever. The light of the dawn shone down and fell on Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan slowly descended, with all the light between heaven and earth, like a god with unparalleled elegance. His feet landed on the ground. Chapter 291. People in Zhongyuan province were not the only ones who heard the thunder. The thunder rolled through the depths of the clouds. The sound waves spread and eventually turned into a soft sound between heaven and earth, then disappeared. The Wang family of Beihai. A Mount Dibing. Xianxia, the metaphysics grandmaster of Zhongzhou state who was a guest on Mount Dibing, suddenly looked up at the sky. The night passed and the dawn was coming. Mount Dibing was emitting misty light. Looking at the sky from Mount Dibing, the sky was still gray. Xianxia looked at the sky and the smile on his face gradually disappeared. His pupils began to contract and even his body became stiff. Daoist. Wang Xiaoyao, who was sitting opposite Xianxia, was a little surprised. Xianxia had been in Mount Dibing for 7 days. Except for the first day when Wang Tianzong personally met Xianxia, Wang Xiaoyao accompanied him for the rest of the days. Many things in Mount Dibing were like this. Xianxia didn't feel neglected. Wang Xiaoyao's identity was honorable enough. And if Wang Xiaoyao didn't want to be hated, he was definitely a person who was hard to be hated. Wang Xiaoyao was the most popular person in the Wang family of Beihai, whether on the mountain or at the foot of the mountain. When there were disagreements within the Wang family of Beihai, Wang Xiaoyao was usually the peacemaker. When there were conflicts between the southeast factions, Wang Xiaoyao was also the mediator. He could even sit with Gu Xingyun, the first elder of Kunlun City, and talk and laugh naturally. There seemed to be no friend or foe in his mind. So everyone could feel his sincerity. Wang Tianzong liked peace. So whenever there were important guests on Mount Dibing, Wang Xiaoyao was the one who accompanied them. Wang Xiaoyao and Xianxia had a good relationship. They were friends despite their age difference. For Xianxia, sitting with Wang Xiaoyao was even more comfortable than facing Wang Tianzong. "Listen," Xianxia said in a deep voice. He was still in a clean Daoist robe holding a horsetail whisk with a youthful face and white hair. He looked like an immortal. "Listen to what?" Wang Xiaoyao looked helpless. After spending so much time with Xianxia, he was used to the metaphysics grandmaster's occasional ramblings. The place where the two of them were was one of the most suitable places for sightseeing in Mount Dibing. Wang Xiaoyao and Xianxia were waiting for the sunrise. But now when the sky was just lit up, Xianxia was so excited. Wang Xiaoyao could not understand. "Dragon roar." Xianxuanzi's deep tone was full of solemnity. In fact, he did not hear the clear thunder. But at that moment he had vaguely heard a dragon's roar. He looked in the direction of the Central Plains province, muttered to himself for a long time and then said slowly, "The dragon is in the Central Plains." He suddenly turned to look at Wang Xiaoyao and said seriously, "I want to see His Majesty Sword Emperor now. This matter concerns the success or failure of my trip. Be quick." Wang Xiaoyao glanced at him and took out his mobile phone without saying a word. Dawn broke over the horizon. There was a morning breeze on Mount Dibing. The snow-white horsetail whisk in Xianxuanzi's hand suddenly moved with the wind. The white silk at the front of the horsetail whisk floated up, stood upright and gently trembled with the wind, like a pale flower without any color. The invisible wind between heaven and earth ran through the whole horsetail whisk. Xianxuanzi's face changed dramatically. Snap! A crisp and clear sound rang on Mount Dibing. In Wang Xiaoyao's suddenly focused sight, the horsetail whisk in Xianxuanzi's hand suddenly exploded. Xianxuanzi spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood spots dyed the broken horsetail whisk red. White mist rose in the pavilion of Mount Dibing. The thick mist suddenly rose and covered a large area of the mountain. The white mist rose high in the sky with Xianxuanzi's extremely angry gasps. The mist was spreading and condensing. The mountain that was washed by the white mist became greener. The white mist was rising. The morning light completely lit up. The bright morning sun jumped out of the endless sea in the east. The golden light fell and the white mist floating high in the sky became a cloud. The cloud drifted farther and farther and finally disappeared completely. Xianxuanzi, with a pale face and blood on the corner of his mouth, stared at the direction where the cloud disappeared. In front of him, the fragments of the horsetail whisk had completely disappeared. "Old Baldas!" Xianxuanzi clenched his teeth and his eyes were full of resentment. "Haunting you, Daoist!" Wang Xiaoyao finally reacted in the shocking change in front of him. He took a step forward and helped Xianxuanzi sit down. "What the hell is going on?" Xianxuanzi took a deep breath. In an extremely short period of time, his originally white and lustrous hair had completely dimmed, turning into an aged grayish white. He wiped the blood on the corner of his mouth with his trembling palm, and suddenly grasped Wang Xiaoyao. "I want to see His Majesty Sword Emperor now." He looked at Wang Xiaoyao's eyes seriously. The distance between them was very close. Wang Xiaoyao could clearly see the ferocious light in his eyes. The sky was completely bright. The long night turned into a day. The sun was shining. In the early summer morning of Mount Dibing, birds were singing and flowers were fragrant. A violent thunder suddenly broke the silence of Mount Dibing. A deep and dazzling blue color suddenly appeared on the top of Mount Dibing. The boundless sword intent exploded on the top of the mountain. The sword intent surged and roared on Mount Dibing. The raging sea at the foot of the mountain began to surge, and the waves crazily slapped the cliff. The sound of the tide boiled with the spreading sword intent. The blue color on the top of the mountain kept spreading. It blocked the sun and distorted the space. The sound of the wind spread in the light. In the silent world, there were only tens of thousands of dazzling thunderbolts left. The thunderbolts wandered and spread in the air. In the blink of an eye, the thunderbolts that blocked the sun had merged and turned into a giant sword hundreds of meters long. The giant sword rotated in the air and the sword intent kept falling like rain. Wang Xiaoyao looked at the top of the mountain with surprise. Xingxiao broke through. His voice was filled with joy from the bottom of his heart. Wang Xingxiao had been active in the outside world in recent years. After Li Tianlan, he could be said to be the well-deserved leader of the young generation in Zhongzhou state. Even in the dark world he had made a name for himself and was known as the heavenly son of Beihai. It was not until 3 months ago that Wang Xingxiao returned to the Wang family of Beihai. He had made further preparations and after 3 months of silence he finally succeeded today. That year Wang Xingxiao was 26 years old. At the age of 26 he was at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm with wind and thunder veins. The battle for the heavenly sun. Wang Xingxiao was already at the forefront of the invincible realm. Wang Xiaoyao was high-spirited. But Xianxuanzi's face grew more and more gloomy. He smiled bitterly, looked at the direction where the thunderbolts floated and scattered and murmured, "It's too late. It's too late." A voice suddenly sounded, extremely calm. It was not Wang Xiaoyao who asked the question. It was Wang Tianzong who quietly appeared in the pavilion. Wang Xiaoyao did not inform him to come. But as soon as he saw Wang Xingxiao break through, Wang Tianzong directly appeared in front of Xianxuanzi. "The dragon vein has been formed." Xianxuanzi looked at Wang Tianzong and said bitterly, "Your Majesty, there is no chance." Wang Tianzong frowned. Wang Xiaoyao's body also tightened. The dragon vein. With Li Guangtu's treason, there had been no dragon vein in Zhongzhou state for more than 20 years. This was something that all the big shots in Zhongzhou state knew. Because of this, Zhongzhou state, known as the world's most powerful country, had been experiencing ups and downs in recent years. Now the dragon vein had been formed? Wang Xiaoyao looked at Wang Tianzong and then at Xianxuanzi. His mouth moved but he didn't say anything in the end. Wang Tianzong's eyes were completely focused. "Just now?" he asked. "I don't know." Xianxuanzi shook his head and his eyes were really blank. "Maybe just now or maybe before that. Wu set me up once before he died. I can't grasp the state of the dragon vein now. The luck accumulated over the years was robbed." There was unwillingness and unvented anger in his crying and laughing face. "I lost. Your Majesty, I can't do anything about Xingxiao now." Wang Tianzong was silent. Xianxuanzi had a high reputation in Zhongzhou state, but in recent years, some people privately said that this metaphysics grandmaster was not as aloof as Great Master Wu at all. Instead he looked more like a metaphysics grandmaster employed by the Wang family of Beihai. It made sense. Xianxuanzi had done a lot for the Wang family of Beihai over the years. His trip was said to be a guest, but in fact, it was the most critical time in the Wang family of Beihai in these years. For many years he and Great Master Wu had been trying to reshape the dragon vein. Both of them had made their own progress. But their final choices were completely different. Great Master Wu chose Li Tianlan. And Xianxuanzi chose Wang Xingxiao, who would inherit the dragon vein. To both of them it would be a huge karma. Xianxuanzi came to Mount Dibbing this time to transfer all the luck accumulated over the years to Wang Xingxiao, so that Wang Xingxiao could bear the prototype of the dragon vein in one fell swoop. But now the dragon vein had been formed. The infinite luck was directly plundered at the moment when the dragon vein was formed. Wang Xingxiao had lost the chance. Whether it was intentional or not, it could be said that the move completely destroyed the overall plan of the Wang family of Beihai. If such an accident didn't happen, once Wang Xingxiao carried the dragon vein and took a whole set of immortality potions, he could rush into the invincible realm in the shortest time. 3 years. 4 years. Maybe a shorter time. But now this opportunity was gone. "The dragon vein is with Li Tianlan," Wang Tianzong said. He didn't use a question sentence but an affirmative sentence. Xianxuanzi looked at Wang Tianzong. Wang Tianzong's eyes were deep and calm without any emotion. Xianxuanzi nodded. "What will happen to him in the future?" Wang Tianzong asked. Xianxuanzi shook his head and said softly, "No one can judge his destiny and no one can speculate the trend of the dragon vein. In the future, with the dragon vein, the stronger Zhongzhou state is, the stronger Li Tianlan will be." From another perspective, it meant that the stronger Li Tianlan was, the stronger Zhongzhou state would be. Invincible to all enemies, unload your armor when you see the dragon. Xianxia said in a deep voice. Li Tianlong has come back. He is now in Zhouzhou. Wang Tianzong's body seemed to shake slightly. He thought for a long time and asked, "No chance." "I'm not sure." Xianxia said, "I can't be sure how long he carries the dragon vein. If it's a short time it's possible to pull it out, but Xingxiao has no chance. If he can successfully pull out the dragon vein, Xiaoyao and Dijiang are the most suitable. If Li Tianlong is really integrated with the luck of Zhongzhou state." Wang Tianzong looked at Xianxia deeply. "What will happen to the Wang family of Beihai in the future?" Xianxia glanced at Wang Tianzong and thought that the Wang family of Beihai was in a crisis. Wang Xingxiao couldn't enter the invincible realm and the plan was completely disrupted. What was there to say about the so-called future? He was silent for a long time and then said lightly, "I don't know." Not knowing meant that he was not sure. But in the eyes of a real hero, not knowing meant that it was not good. The future of the Wang family of Beihai was not good. Wang Tianzong's eyes flickered and he said calmly, "What should I do now? Kill Li Tianlong?" Xianxia was silent for a moment and said lightly, "The dragon vein has a foundation. If you want to pull it out, you must do it in the place where the dragon vein was born." He paused, lowered his eyelids and said softly, "Your Majesty, if you want to take back the dragon vein, you must first take Lonely Mountain in Linnan." Chapter 292. Wang Tianzong did not express his position in the end. The fate of Zhongzhou state was related to the overall situation of the Wang family of Beihai. He chose to remain silent. Silence was often more powerful than a promise. Wang Tianzong focused on the fruit plate on the marble table in front of him. The fruits on the plate were very fresh. A drop of crystal-clear water dripped down from the grapes on the plate. The air rippled. Wang Tianzong's figure gradually faded and eventually disappeared. Wang Xiaoyao took 2 steps forward. He looked at the ashen-faced Xianxia with a complicated look in his eyes. The dragon vein was reunited. Li Tianlong carried the dragon vein. Wang Xingxiao lost his chance. The dragon vein was pulled away. He occupied Lonely Mountain in Lin, and then killed Li Honghe. He thought about the conversation between Xianxia and his elder brother. He had a lot of questions. But in the end he didn't say anything. Xianxia sat numbly in the pavilion. In a short time he was sweating all over and the sweat soaked through his Taoist robe. This metaphysics grandmaster, who had become more and more important in Zhongzhou state after Great Master Wu's death, looked extremely weak. He picked up a grape expressionlessly. Skinning's hand was obviously shaking. He placed the fresh and tender fruit into his mouth. Tasted sweet and sour. Xianxia looked down at his trembling hands. His eyes were filled with exhaustion and weariness. In his decades of metaphysics career, from the very beginning as a swindler to a grandmaster, he had been beaten, scolded, driven away, respected, feared, and worshipped. He had experienced ups and downs throughout his life, encountered unimaginable poverty and enjoyed dazzling luxury. Xianxia suddenly laughed at himself. In this life he had helped many people achieve their goals, but it seemed that he had never accomplished anything that he truly wanted to do. Because there was only one thing he wanted to do. Xianxuanzi's eyes were blank. After his fate completely dissipated, he looked like an old man who was about to die, lonely and desolate. At this moment he suddenly thought of the ups and downs of his life. He had a daughter. His daughter was buried by his ambition. In the early summer morning, Mount Dibbing was warm, and the fragrance of flowers spread all over the mountain. Xianxuanzi suddenly began to miss the cold wind and snow in the past. He breathed with difficulty and forced his weak and exhausted body to stand up. He whispered, "Let's go down the mountain. I'll see you off," Wang Xiaoyao said in a timely manner. The two walked out of the pavilion, walking on the stone path full of blooming flowers. The flowers in the mountains were in full bloom, and the path was winding down through the flowers and plants. In the quiet morning there were colorful flowers everywhere. Xianxuanzi's body swayed and he staggered down. Wang Xiaoyao frowned and finally couldn't help but say, "Taoist priest, you are not in a good state now. Why don't you rest on the mountain for 2 days?" He had a good relationship with Xianxuanzi and now he was really thinking about him. But now Xianxuanzi wanted to see the snow. He shook his head and said softly, "I'm fine." "Look at you." Wang Xiaoyao's frown deepened. "What?" Xianxuanzi looked at Wang Xiaoyao with a smile and said gently, "Are you afraid that I will die?" Wang Xiaoyao smiled bitterly. Even if Xianxia had lost many years of luck, he was still the metaphysics grandmaster of Zhongzhou state. Such a person could not be judged by common sense, but his current state was indeed worrying. "I won't die," Xianxia said. His eyes were resolute. He only wanted to do one thing, but he achieved nothing in this life. He dared not die, and he couldn't die. Great Master Wu could have survived that year, but he had to die. But Xianxia didn't mind living on. In the flowers all over the mountain, a piece of white suddenly appeared in front of the stone path. That was the purest color. It was like the pure snow that had never been trodden on. Xianxia looked at the white flowers in front of him. The white flowers fell to the ground one by one in the morning wind. The wind was stronger. The white petals began to swirl and fly in the wind like falling snow. Xianxia looked at it quietly and suddenly said, "What flower is this?" "This is snow eagle," Wang Xiaoyao said with a smile. "It's a new breed cultivated by my sister-in-law a few years ago. It only blooms in spring and it will all wither after early summer." Snow eagle. Xianxia looked at the petals flying in the air. He had never heard of the name of this flower, but it was really beautiful. "Summer solstice is a thoughtful person," Xianxia said softly. Wang Xiaoyao smiled and didn't say much. The two walked down in a sea of white flowers as if they were walking on a snow mountain. The white petals were blowing and falling in the wind, constantly undulating. A touch of delicate fragrance gradually wafted in the air. The fragrance was mellow and deep. Wang Xiaoyao smelled the strange smell and wondered if his sister-in-law had improved the genetic composition of snow eagle again. Xianxia looked at the flowers and plants in front of him deeply. Snow eagle spread over a large area. Whether it was moving forward or backward, it was surrounded by snow-white petals with unchanging beauty. The environment was confusing. Xianxuanzi's eyes gradually fell into a trance in the unchanging scenery. The petals were disappearing. The delicate fragrance was getting stronger. There was only wind and snow left in front of him. The wind and snow were cold. Xianxuanzi subconsciously tightened his Taoist robe. A butterfly appeared in front of him. Xianxuanzi suddenly came to his senses. Looking at the white flowers around him, he realized that he was on Mount Dibing, and the white around him was just flowers after all. The butterfly fluttered in front of Xianxuanzi, flapping its wings, colorful. Xianxuanzi stopped and looked at the butterfly flying in front of him quietly. It was so free and carefree. The butterfly kept hovering in front of Xianxuanzi. Xianxuanzi could see its wings and even its small eyes. The eyes were very deep, as if they were looking at him. Wang Xiaoyao also stopped walking. He didn't see the butterfly. He just looked ahead. At the end of the snow eagle, less than 100 meters in front of him, stood a woman in white. She was quiet and ethereal, as if she was integrated with the endless snow eagles. Several figures stood beside her, carefully guarding her without emitting any aura. Wang Xiaoyao wasn't surprised. He felt like he had seen a ghost in broad daylight. He didn't know how the other party appeared here without being discovered. This was even more terrifying than seeing a ghost. The butterfly flew away. It disappeared in the falling snow-like petals. Xianxuanzi, who didn't know how long he had stopped, felt lost. He laughed at himself and took a step forward subconsciously. The winding stone path suddenly became a bottomless abyss. Time seemed to be fast-forwarded countless times. The wind and clouds were gone high in the sky, and the sun kept rising. The temperature began to become scorching, and then it became hot. The whole sun seemed to be pushed from the east to the west by someone's hand. The twilight completely enveloped. Xianxuanzi took a step in the air and suddenly fell. The twilight shrouded the abyss, and it was extremely quiet and dark everywhere. Xianxuanzi's heart kept sinking with his body. He didn't think about what was wrong with it. The disordered time and the abyss that shouldn't have appeared were subconsciously filtered in his mind. In his heart, there was only the most instinctive fear when a person was about to die. Xianxuanzi kept struggling in the abyss. He wanted to shout, but he couldn't make any sound in the extreme darkness and silence. His body fell down uncontrollably. It was like falling from the human world to hell with no end. The sound of waves suddenly appeared around him. The majestic sound of waves swept everything. Xianxuanzi still didn't feel anything wrong. He remembered that he was on Mount Dibing and the sea was under Mount Dibing. The surging waves were deafening. A light suddenly lit up in the endless darkness above. The light occupied all of Xianxuanzi's vision. Xianxia groaned and his body fell to the ground hard. The dark ground was like a soft sea surface. The grass and flowers were vivid in the lonely light in the sky, but the whole ground was rolling like waves. Xianxia looked around. All the light fell on him. Vaguely, he only felt that he was standing on the only small piece of land in the darkness. The almost boiling sound of the tide occupied all of his hearing. Xianxia laughed. As if he was glad that he survived the disaster, he laughed very happily. "Why are you happy, Daoist?" A chilly voice suddenly rang out. The voice was very light, but it spread all over the sky in an instant. Even the roaring sound of the tide was instantly suppressed. The echoes kept echoing in the sky. "Why are you happy? Why are you happy? Happy?" The light in the sky gradually dissipated with the voice. Xianxia finally saw the surrounding scene clearly. There was light in the darkness. There was heaven and earth. The sky was glowing with a strange red color. The scarlet light shone on the sea below. The seawater was pitch black, flowing in countless huge whirlpools. He was on a ground of about 10 square meters. The ground was too small. As far as the eye could see, it was all dark seawater that could swallow everything. There was no end in sight. A few dark beads stood in the seawater as if they went straight to the sky. The scene looked very clear, but it was extremely far away. "Who are you?" Xianxia looked ahead. In his sight was a woman in a white dress. It was too dark here. She stood in the place with her back to the light. Xianxia only felt that she looked a little familiar, but he was not sure who she was. The woman did not answer Xianxuanzi's question. She just stared at him quietly. Xianxuanzi saw a pair of deep and bright eyes. Those eyes were calm and cold like the deep Milky Way. "Daoist, what's your identity? Why are you so down today?" There seemed to be a hint of a smile in the woman's voice. She said softly, "You're really like a dying old dog." Xianxuanzi fell silent. She was silent for a long time before she said with uncertainty, "Are you going to kill me?" He felt that it was ridiculous. With his ability, no one would want to kill him when they found him. Was there an exception today? Otherwise. The woman's voice became softer and softer, like the chilly wind blowing from the sky. "You don't deserve to die?" Xianxuanzi squinted at the woman in the dark. He felt that she was more and more familiar. "More than 20 years ago, after Li Guangtu committed treason, you have been planning something. Over the years you have 3 chances. The first one was 16 years ago and it was destroyed by some external factors that could not be interfered with. The second one was 10 years ago. You felt that you were not sure, so you hesitated and missed the opportunity. The third one was about 4 years ago and it was destroyed by me." The woman's tone was indifferent. "The dragon vein of Zhou State is your 4th chance. Daoist, do you really care about the dragon vein? You know that the Wang family of Beihai's fate is extremely prosperous, and they can't bear the dragon vein at all. But all these years, you have been tampering with the fate of the Wang family of Beihai, creating an illusion. Finally, you deceived Wang Tianzong in Zhou State. Now you are regarded as the chief metaphysics grandmaster of the Wang family of Beihai. You care about the dragon vein." The woman said coldly, "It's all a cover. You have always wanted to provoke a war between the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family. Even though the Li family is now at the end of its road, you don't want to let them go. Don't you deserve to die?" Xianxuanzi's body suddenly became stiff. As if the biggest secret in his heart had been revealed, his breathing suddenly became rapid. He stared at the exquisite figure in the faint light and said ferociously, "Who the hell are you? Is it important?" The woman said coldly. Xianxuanzi took a deep breath. Under the blood-red sky, he laughed somewhat crazily. "Yes, it's not important. The important thing is that you seem to have seen through my plan. That is to say, my plan was destroyed by you again, right? I deserve to die. Don't the Li family deserve to die? Don't Li Tianlong deserve to die? No, they deserve to die too. I will find a chance to completely destroy them. If I am lucky enough to survive this time when Wang Tianzong kills Li Honghe, I will personally extract the dragon vein from Li Tianlong. I will use the dragon vein to completely destroy the fate of the Wang family of Beihai. Haha, they all deserve to die. Deserve to die." The woman took 2 steps forward. "You don't approve of Tianlong?" she asked softly. "Why should I approve of him?" Xianxuanzi's face was cold. He really didn't like Li Tianlong. When he first met Li Tianlong in Huating, Xianxia saw too much ambition in his calm eyes. That was the desire that was suppressed to the extreme, too crazy and intense. That was the ambition that could destroy everything. Xianxia would not admit that he saw the shadow of himself in those eyes. He just didn't like Li Tianlan. Does this matter have anything to do with you? The woman suddenly asked. Xianxia was stunned. No matter what, he must die. Xianxia said. You hate the Li family. The woman spoke slowly, but she was very sure of it. You seem to know a lot of things. Xianxia looked at her coldly. Then you should also know that the child of the Li family was a girl. That child died prematurely. Where did this bastard come from? Is he Li Guangtu's illegitimate child? Illegitimate child. The woman was silent. She seemed to be thinking about something. The killing intent in the air began to fade quietly. The blood-colored light in the sky gradually faded and returned to darkness. The furious sea was no longer boiling. The ground under Xianxuanzi's feet expanded wildly, from 10 meters to thousands of meters in an instant, like a small island. Answer a question for me. The woman's voice echoed between heaven and earth. Do you hate the Li family the most? Or Kunlun City? Xianxuanzi's expression changed dramatically. He who had lost all his luck was in the weakest and most dazed state today. At this moment his heart was on the verge of collapse. What the hell do you know? He looked at the woman who was getting farther away from him as the ground under his feet expanded, and his tone was furious. I know your surname is Li. The woman said softly. You want to provoke a war between the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family. There would be no suspense in this war, but Li Honghe's current state was too dangerous. If the Wang family of Beihai took action, the Wang family of Beihai would definitely suffer heavy losses and the Li family would be completely destroyed when the human emperor didn't have enough energy. Your metaphysics has long been deeply rooted in people's hearts. When you use the dragon vein to wipe out the luck of the Wang family of Beihai, the Wang family of Beihai will vanish in less than 20 years. At that time, Kunlun City will dominate Zhongzhou State. It's a very good layout. For so many years, who could have thought that the metaphysics grandmaster of the Wang family of Beihai is actually from Kunlun City? Oh, I'm wrong. This should be the deal between you and Kunlun City, right? Xianxuanzi fell to the ground, completely disheartened. You don't care about anything. You don't care about the dragon vein yourself or even Zhongzhou State. You only care about your daughter. Many years ago you gave up for your so-called ambition and now you want to take it back with all your might. How stupid. The woman slowly walked over from afar and commented rudely. I'm really stupid. Xianxuanzi laughed bitterly at himself. I shouldn't have, so answer my question. Do you hate Kunlun City more? Or the Li family more? The woman asked slowly. Does it make sense? Xianxuanzi said numbly. If I don't die, the Li family will be destroyed. Of course it makes sense. I actually don't mind you destroying the Li family, and I can even help you deal with Kunlun City. The woman said softly. This sentence seemed to directly express her position. Xianxuanzi suddenly looked up. Are you from the Wang family of Beihai? Are you summer solstice? We met in Lin'an. The woman finally walked to Xianxuanzi. My surname is Qin. A dreamy and cold face appeared in Xianxuanzi's sight. It was perfect and flawless, with a touch of majesty in its nobility. It's you. Xianxuanzi's tone was very low and a little unbelievable. You obviously don't know martial arts. This is not martial arts. Qin Weibai said slowly, this is the spiritual domain. Boom. With her voice, the sky suddenly fell and the earth cracked. Countless cracks appeared in the sky that had almost completely disappeared. The sky poured down, and the endless deep sea in the surroundings seemed to be pressed down by an invisible pressure in an instant. The ground was rising. The whole sea kept sinking, thousands of meters, tens of thousands of meters. An abyss was formed between the ground and the sea. The sky was still breaking. Xianxuanzi finally realized that something was wrong. He looked at this unrealistic scene and suddenly realized that he was not in Mount Dibbing at all. Where am I? He asked. Mount Dibbing. Qin Weibai's answer was a little unexpected. Xianxuanzi suddenly thought of something. He looked at Qin Weibai with a complicated look. Hypnosis. Qin Weibai was indifferent and silent. Xianxuanzi completely understood. He remembered the butterfly he saw not long ago. Xianxuanzi suddenly felt a little ridiculous. He pointed at the scene of the sky falling and the earth cracking around him. So, these are all fake. What I see is a scene created by hypnosis. But you're real. Qin Weibai said calmly. She looked at the deep sea that was still sinking. If you jump from here, you won't wake up during the fall. When you really fall into the deep sea, you will fall into a state of brain death. No one can find out the cause of your death. Xianxia looked at Qin Weibai with a complicated look. What a marvelous skill. He said softly. Hypnosis had always been the unique skill of the Li family. But it was the first time that Xianxia heard that hypnosis could be used to this extent. This field was too mysterious, even no less than martial arts. Until now, he didn't understand why Qin Weibai became the second most powerful person in Samsara Palace. I'm flattered. Qin Weibai said lightly. Who taught you hypnosis? Xianxia asked curiously. Li Kuangtu? No, the time is not right. Is that Li Honghe? Qin Weibai glanced at him. She waved her hand. Light shone on the horizon. Xianxuanzi's sight returned to normal. I said, I don't mind you destroying the Li family. Qin Weibai said, because I hate them too. But I heard that you're Li Tianlan's woman. Xianxuanzi looked at Qin Weibai. The lines on Qin Weibai's face suddenly softened. She said softly, so you can deal with the Li family, Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai. These have nothing to do with me. You just need to support Tianlan. Today I was going to kill you. You have a lot of secrets that I know, and there are also things that I don't know. But here I can know everything. I will take everything from you and then I will let you die a horrible death. Qin Weibai said softly, but I suddenly find that it seems to be a good choice to let you live. Let me live and help the heir of the Li family? Xianxuanzi sneered. You're helping me. Qin Weibai looked into Xianxuanzi's eyes. What do you want? Xianxuanzi was full of doubts. He was a metaphysics grandmaster, but he was not omniscient. On the surface, Qin Weibai's position had always been very simple. But only when he really got in touch with her did he find that her thoughts were so complicated. Didn't you say that I was a witch who brought disaster to the country? Qin Weibai smiled faintly. I want a chaotic world. I need a new era after extreme chaos. Now the dark world is too peaceful. Xianxuanzi looked at Qin Weibai dumbfounded, as if he was looking at a lunatic. The dark world was too peaceful? In the past few years, except for the year after the final battle of Heaven Capital, when had the dark world been peaceful in the past 2 years? It was a complete mess. Anyway, the Daoist won't care about these. Qin Weibai said, you know the possibility of your successful deal with Kunlun City. In this case, why don't you help me? You give me what I want and I'll give you what you want. What you want is the so-called new era. Xianxuanzi looked at Qin Weibai. And your life? Qin Weibai looked at Xianxuanzi without backing down. I'll help you fulfill your wish so that you can die in peace. How about that? Deal. Xianxuanzi looked calm. This is not a deal. Qin Weibai shook her head. This is surrender. From today until you die, you belong to the Samsara Palace. Kneel. Xianxuanzi thought of a strange title. After a long silence, he straightened up, tidied up his Daoist robe and knelt down in front of Qin Weibai. Boss. Xianxuanzi said calmly. Boom. Heaven and earth completely collapsed. The darkness, the deep sea, the drifting land, everything disappeared. Xianxuanzi's eyes instantly became clear. He stood on the path of Mount Dibbing, surrounded by white petals that were flying like snow. About 100 meters in front of him, a woman was turning around casually. Xianxuanzi's ears were full of the earth-shattering roar, and Qin Weibai's calm but irresistible voice. Welcome to the Samsara Palace. P.S. I'm really not digging a pit at will. Almost all the pits are dug bigger when a little clue is given in the previous chapter. I can fill them now, but I can't extricate myself. A chapter of more than 6,000 words. Chapter 293. The so-called beautiful legs from a rigorous aesthetic point of view involved many standards such as leg length, thigh-body ratio, thigh circumference, leg-belly circumference, thigh length, calf length, and so on. Li Tianlan thought it was bullshit. Beautiful legs were beautiful legs and there was no need for those fancy data. Li Tianlan had been peeking at Dongqing Rushi's legs. Dongqing Rushi's legs were very slender and long, and they looked white, tender, and well-proportioned. Under the sunlight, her legs, which were leaning against each other, seemed to have a luster that made people's mouths dry. It was a very straight and enchanting feeling. Li Tianlon didn't want to look. But every once in a while he couldn't help but take a peek. The legs under the denim shorts were white, and every inch of skin seemed to show youth and vitality. Dongqing Rushi had a ponytail. Her long hair was tied up, and the off-the-shoulder short-sleeved shirt exposed her delicate and smooth shoulders. Her collarbone was also very beautiful. Li Tianlon's eyes wandered. He felt very obscene. But he really couldn't control himself. The bitter cold life of the glacier in the polar region was very quiet. Quiet also meant loneliness. Li Tianlon had been thinking about his martial arts before, so he didn't feel anything. But now his martial arts was close to completion, but the road had not yet come to an end. Now he walked into the colorful world and faced Dongqing Rushi, especially when he thought that she had a fiancé. Such an ambiguous identity, together with the delicate fragrance and skin of her, brought Li Tianlon a fatal temptation. In the past 3 years, Li Tianlon had not seen any beautiful women. But he was a man who had experienced women. Li Tianlon felt that the corners of his mouth were a little dry. He licked his lips and couldn't help but take another look. Really white. It was too wretched. Shaking his head in confusion, Li Tianlon wanted to get a bottle of water. Stop the car. Dongqing Rushi suddenly said. High speed. Li Tianlon pointed to the road ahead that was constantly moving backward. Can't stop. His somewhat turbulent and chaotic heart seemed to calm down a little as he spoke. The red sports car was speeding on the highway. It was on the way from Zhongyuan to Huating. Tribulation did not accompany Li Tianlon to Huating. The two met. After Li Tianlon got falling stars, it was Dongqing Rushi who went with him. In the early hours of this morning, the high-level officials of Zhongzhou State finally determined the time of this graduation maneuver of the Sky Academy and the Deep Sea Academy. July 31st. The day before Army Day. The location was in Huating. There was still about a month before the maneuver. By now, the order to suspend classes had probably reached the 2 special warfare academies. The elites of the Deep Sea Academy would leave for Huating in the next few days and adjust their state in Huating. Dongqing Rushi was only a few days ahead of schedule. Tribulation was asked to stay by Dongqing Wudi, the standing minister of the army headquarters, who rushed to Zhongyuan overnight after the meeting. Therefore Li Tianlon and Dongqing Rushi were the only ones on the trip to Huating. From early morning to afternoon, the distance had exceeded more than 1,000 kilometers, and Huating was getting closer and closer. Li Tianlon did not expect that Dongqing Rushi would ask to stop when they were about to arrive at Huating. But as soon as she spoke, Li Tianlon felt much more relaxed. The two of them were not talkative people to begin with. Most of the time they were silent. The atmosphere was strange and ambiguous. Li Tianlon's mind seemed to become restless with the silence. Talking is good for concentration. The service area of Huating is right ahead. Li Tianlon said, Why don't we wait? Can you wait? Dongqing Rushi looked at Li Tianlon and asked. Her eyes were big and full of clarity. The eyes were the window of the soul. Li Tianlon did not know if this sentence was right, but most women with a pair of beautiful eyes were not ugly. Qin Weibai's eyes were cold and dreamy. Even at the softest time, her eyes were still as bright as the Milky Way. Wang Yuetong's eyes were dark and pure, with wisps of cleverness and cunning, which had a very seductive and enchanting charm. Dongqing Rushi's eyes were very clear. They were as clear as water, which was pure and flawless, even close to holiness. Each had its own characteristics. Li Tianlon glanced at her inexplicably and did not know what she meant. Dongqing Rushi looked at Li Tianlon quietly, and her eyes were a little strange. Li Tianlon felt like she was looking at an extremely wretched pervert. He was a little embarrassed and his face became unnatural. It was shameful to be caught peeping. Li Tianlon decided not to look at her anymore. It doesn't matter. Dongqing Rushi said crisply, Stop the car. I'll change seats with you. As long as she didn't kick him out of the car. Li Tianlon thought about it silently and parked the car on the emergency lane on the side. Dongqing Rushi got out of the car but did not move. Li Tianlon walked around the back of the car to the passenger seat. Dongqing Rushi looked at him and her eyes were still a little strange. Li Tianlon touched his nose. When he was about to say something, Dongqing Rushi had already turned around and went to the driver's seat. The red sports car started again and drove to Huating with the roar of the engine. Dongqing Rushi took out a pack of cigarettes from the storage box beside her and handed it to Li Tianlon. I remember you smoke, so I prepared this for you. I don't know if you can get used to it. I said I wanted the best, so they gave me this. Li Tianlong took it and looked at it. The cigarette box was printed with the logo of the Deep Sea Academy and a few ancient characters. Li Tianlong had heard of this kind of cigarette. It was not in circulation on the market, but the Sky Academy sold it. A box of 3 credits was equivalent to a student's food for half a month. Thank you. Li Tianlong opened the cigarette and lit one. He inhaled the smoke into his lungs. He hadn't smoked for a long time and his brain suddenly felt dizzy. Li Tianlong fell silent and enjoyed it. Why do you always peep at me? Dongqing Rushi didn't seem to know what to say to Li Tianlong, so she asked a question that made Li Tianlong extremely embarrassed. Li Tianlong coughed in the smoke. He really didn't have the face to say that he didn't peep. It was already very obscene to be caught peeping, and it was even more embarrassing to be exposed. How hypocritical would he be if he didn't admit it now? He subconsciously touched the silver bracelet on his wrist and pretended to be calm. Oh, your legs are very beautiful, I just want to. Dongqing Rushi reached out and grabbed Li Tianlong's palm. Her hand was very small, white and delicate without calluses. Li Tianlong could feel her delicate skin trembling slightly. She grabbed Li Tianlong's hand and put it on her thigh. Dongqing Rushi's little face blushed. Maybe she couldn't react in time, or maybe she didn't want to hide at all. Li Tianlong didn't resist at all. His hand fell on Dongqing Rushi's thigh, and he easily felt the tenderness and elasticity of the second miss of the Dongqing clan, the genius of Jade Pool. Touch it. Dongqing Rushi said in a clear voice. You've been looking at me as if you want to eat me. You're driving absent-mindedly, which is very dangerous. So she changed seats with Li Tianlong. Would it be more convenient for Li Tianlong to touch it? Li Tianlong touched it. He really touched it. Dongqing Rushi's legs were very slender, but they were indescribably plump and smooth like warm jade. Dongqing Rushi's legs were slightly tightened, and her face was getting redder and redder. Your hands are very cold, she said. Maybe I'm used to staying in the polar ground. Li Tianlong replied, and his eyes were extremely hot. The polar ground? Dongqing Rushi hesitated. When I entered the fire-flaming realm, my master wanted me to go to the polar ground. But I thought it was very far and I didn't really want to go. A year ago when I entered the thunder-shocking realm, I wanted to go to you but my master didn't let me go. It's a good place, Li Tianlong said, but it's really not suitable for girls to go alone. It's such a big place you can't find me even if you go there. He stroked Dongqing Rushi's legs carefully, as if he was playing with and appreciating a rare work of art. He didn't seem to be touched at all by the fact that Dongqing Rushi entered the thunder-shocking realm. It was not until this time that Dongqing Rushi suddenly realized that although they didn't talk much along the way, they still had something to talk about if they wanted to. Especially for Li Tianlong. He had been away for 3 years and now he came back. Even if he didn't talk about the general trend of the dark world and the already chaotic situation that made everyone's scalp numb. But at least Li Tianlong always had to pay attention to the younger generation. But Li Tianlong didn't ask at all. He simply asked how several members of the East Emperor Palace were doing now. After getting no bad news, he changed the topic. Wang Xingxiao, Gu Hanshan, Jiang Shangyu, or others. Li Tianlong didn't ask at all. He didn't ask about tribulation or Dongqing Rushi. Dongqing Rushi didn't think it was his negligence. He didn't ask. Did he not want to ask or did he disdain to ask? Dongqing Rushi turned to look at Li Tianlong, wanting to ask him about his current realm. The hand on her thigh was getting stronger and stronger, more and more presumptuous. The big hand gradually moved up. Dongqing Rushi could feel the calloused hand rubbing her delicate skin. Her foot on the gas pedal was a little weak. The hand finally went into her shorts. Li Tianlong touched a piece of cloth that seemed to be very thin. Dongqing Rushi's legs were completely closed. She bit her red lip and looked at Li Tianlong. The look in her eyes was not joy, anger, rejection, or pandering. It was faint. It was a very strange look. Li Tianlong's hand reappeared in her shorts and his expression was very calm. Not in the car. Dongqing Rushi bit her lip and whispered. This was definitely a rejection that could make people fantasize. Li Tianlong looked at her in surprise. Not in the car. Was the emphasis of this sentence the first 2 words or the second 2 words? Li Tianlong took his hand off Dongqing Rushi's leg. He put his hand in front of his nose and sniffed. The movement was as natural as lighting a cigarette. Dongqing Rushi's beautiful face was completely red and she didn't know what to say. Do you think I'm very obscene? Very obscene? Li Tianlan recalled the delicate fragrance and asked softly. Dongqing Rushi shook her head subconsciously. She blushed and didn't dare to look at Li Tianlan. After a while she stammered, We are engaged. Li Tianlan frowned. You don't mind? Do you like it? Dongqing Rushi asked back. Li Tianlan was silent. He had always been a person who could face his desires honestly. He grunted and said, I like it. He was telling the truth. Snow country and the polar region. Those 3 years were really too cold, so cold that it felt like his blood was going to freeze completely. He didn't know whether it was because he hadn't seen a woman for a long time, or Dongqing Rushi was still changing in the past 3 years. When he saw Dongqing Rushi this time, Li Tianlan only felt that she was more beautiful than 3 years ago and her figure was better. Li Tianlan had an irrepressible desire in his heart. He needed a woman. He needed the tenderness and warmth he longed for. He saw a mirage on the sea. The scene was beautiful, but it was also very cold, colder than the polar region. Li Tianlan really liked the feeling of touching Dongqing Rushi's thigh. It was very warm. For no reason. He didn't know whether he liked Dongqing Rushi or not, but he liked this feeling. No one would dislike it. Then I don't mind. Dongqing Rushi whispered, as long as you're happy. She asked Li Tianlan for a hug. Because that could make the elders in the family happy. Now she was willing to let Li Tianlan profane her. Because that could make Li Tianlan happy. As for herself, she had nothing to be unhappy about. If he was happy, she seemed to be happy too. This should mean that she didn't mind. She had learned a lot of things since she was a child. Didn't they all make him happy? As long as he liked them. Even if I don't like you, you're willing? Li Tianlan thought about it and asked very seriously. It was a little shameless, but his eyes quietly became solemn. Dongqing Rushi thought about it. She wanted to say that they were together because of the engagement. She wanted to say that she didn't like Li Tianlan either. But did she really not like him? He didn't know. She really didn't know. Since she was a child, she had always had a feeling that her life was prepared for Li Tianlan. This feeling was like instinct. It didn't matter whether she liked him or not. Then do you like me? Dongqing Rushi looked at Li Tianlan carefully. Li Tianlan was silent for a while. He thought of his new mobile phone. The screen of the mobile phone was no longer that photo. Qin Weibai's name was no longer on the communication software. He had been blacklisted and couldn't be contacted. His palm trembled slightly and he said hoarsely, I like Qin Weibai. Dongqing Rushi seemed to think of something. She handed her hand to Li Tianlan. She wore a lady's watch on her wrist. The watch was elegant and exquisite. There were a few diamonds on it, but they were all colored diamonds. In the light, the watch looked indescribably luxurious and expensive. My sister gave it to me. It's a couple's watch. Our names are engraved on the hands. It's a miniature sculpture. You can only see it with a magnifying glass. The letters on the dial are ancient Greek. My sister gave it to me for my birthday last year. Is it beautiful? Li Tianlan nodded with a smile. Sister Chuchi gave it to you? She's so generous. It's not that sister. Dongqing Rushi shook her head. Sister Little Bai. She looked at Li Tianlan and said, Qin Weibai. Li Tianlan looked at the watch on Dongqing Rushi's wrist with a dull face. His eyes were complicated. My sister ordered 4 watches. One was given to me, one was sent to the Wang family of Beihai, and one was for herself. I sent your watch to Emperor Dong's palace. Her own watch has her and your names engraved on the hands. But your watch is more complicated. Seems to have our names engraved on it. Dongqing Rushi looked at the watch on her wrist. A smile appeared on her beautiful face. Her face was pure and happy. Li Tianlan's emotions were tumbling inside. He didn't know what it meant. But looking at Dongqing Rushi's innocent face full of smiles, his heart suddenly moved. 4 watches. The miniature sculpture hands. Dongqing Rushi. Li Tianlan. Qin Weibai. Li Tianlan. The other one was Wang Yuetong. Li Tianlan. Dongqing Rushi looked innocent when she said this. This was definitely not the behavior that a woman should have. Even if she didn't know much about the world. Li Tianlan finally knew what the problem was. Behind this beautiful and pure appearance, Dongqing Rushi seemed to have lost her self-obsession in the constraints of the engagement. He was fine as long as he was fine. This Dongqing Rushi was different from Li Tianlan's impression. Most of his impression of her came from the time they got along in East Island and Heaven Capital. The memory kept coming back. At this moment Li Tianlan really understood. It turned out that the Dongqing Rushi he saw in Heaven Capital was not her most of the time, except for